Picking your nose. This one feels gross, and yes, it is gross, but the actual biology behind it is way more interesting than people give it credit for. Snot is not just waste your body is trying to push out and get rid of. It is a filter. It is the first physical barrier between the air you breathe and the inside of your lungs. And it is loaded with antimicrobial enzymes like lysozyme that actively kill bacteria as you breathe. That sticky stuff in your nose is doing real work every single second of the day. Every time you sniff something dusty, or walk through a crowded room, or stand near someone who is sick, your snot is the first thing trapping particles, viruses and bacteria before they have a chance to get any further in. And here is the part nobody really talks about. Limited research suggests that the bacteria and small antigens stuck in your snot actually help train your immune system through repeated low-dose exposure when they get reintroduced to the gut or the back of the throat. It is basically how the body samples the outside world and learns what to react to and what to leave alone. Kids who pick their noses tend to show stronger immune profiles in some studies, partly because they are constantly exposing themselves to a low background of microbial information. Now, obviously, do not be the guy doing this in public. Wash your hands, use a tissue when you can, but the act itself is not the horrifying health crime your mom told you it was when you were 6. It is a weirdly functional little process the body has been doing since forever. Cracking your knuckles. Your aunt was wrong. That popping sound you have been told for 30 years would give you arthritis is not damaging your joints at all. It is gas. Specifically, it is dissolved nitrogen forming a bubble in the synovial fluid that lubricates the joint, and then that bubble collapsing as the pressure changes. That is the entire mechanism. No bone is grinding, no cartilage is wearing down. There is a guy who cracked the knuckles on one hand and not the other for over 60 years just to test this, and the x-rays at the end showed no difference between the two hands. What it actually does is keep the joint capsule mobile. People who never move their fingers through full range tend to develop stiffer joints over time, and the gentle crack stretches the capsule and momentarily decompresses everything inside. It is not magic, it is not therapy, but it is also not the slow path to arthritis people keep telling you it is. The thing that actually wrecks joints is not cracking. It is sitting completely still for 40 years, never loading the joints properly, and then acting shocked when they start falling apart. Crack away. Peeing in the shower. Yes, do it. There is no health downside. The warm water keeps the area cleaner than people assume, and the steady stream of hot water washes whatever you produce straight down the drain along with the soap and shampoo. You save a full flush of clean drinking water every time, which actually adds up across a year more than you would think. But the real reason this habit is quietly good for you is something most people never even consider. The pelvic floor is the group of muscles that controls when you pee, when you do not, and how completely you empty. A surprising number of people, especially men over 40 and women who have had kids, have a chronically tense pelvic floor that never really relaxes. Sitting on a cold porcelain toilet seat is not exactly a calming experience. Standing in warm water, body heat up, muscles loose, you actually empty your bladder more completely than you do on a cold seat in a cold bathroom. More complete emptying means less leftover urine sitting around, which means lower irritation of the bladder lining, and a lower risk of urinary tract infections in the long run. So the gross out factor here is basically social. The physiology is fine. Sniffing your own armpit. This one is weirder, and most people have done it, and most people would die before admitting it. But there is a reason your brain has you doing this automatically when you are stressed, or after a workout, or when you are sitting somewhere quiet and a bit anxious. Your own scent contains real information. Your sweat composition genuinely changes with stress, illness, hormonal shifts, and immune activity. When you smell yourself, your brain is doing a quick internal check-in on what is going on inside. There is research showing that exposure to your own body smell, including your own stress sweat, can have a calming effect on the nervous system in certain contexts because it reads as completely familiar. It is one of the few smells the brain instantly recognizes as safe. People with anxiety have used worn t-shirts and old hoodies as comfort objects, partly for this exact reason. So next time you catch yourself doing it, just know that your brain is running a small diagnostic in the background. Just maybe do it somewhere private if you can help it. Biting the inside of your cheek when thinking. This one looks like a nervous tick, but it is actually a focus tool the body uses without checking with you first. The inside of your cheek is loaded with sensory nerve endings connected to the trigeminal nerve, which is one of the largest nerves in your face, and feeds directly into the brainstem. A small mechanical stimulation in there, like a gentle press from your teeth, fires off a signal that briefly bumps up alertness and concentration. You will notice people doing it when they are calculating something, working through a hard idea, or trying to remember a word that is just out of reach. It is basically the body's version of tapping a desk to stay alert in a long meeting. As long as you are not chewing through the tissue and giving yourself a permanent ulcer, this habit is doing more for your focus than most of the focus supplements people overpay for online. It is free, it is built in, and your brain has been quietly using it for years without ever telling you. And here is the part where I would normally tell you that no amount of weird little focus hacks will fix the situation if your actual food is a mess. That is exactly why both the Blandest Band cookbook and the Summer Shred program exist. Blandest Band is 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, loaded fries, desserts, all the food people assume they have to give up the moment they try to get lean. And the Summer Shred program is a 6-week personalized program designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Blandest Band included. Both are half price right now for launch. First link in the description. Talking to yourself out loud. People who do this in public get a weird look. People who do this in private are quietly outperforming everyone else on memory tests, decision making, and problem solving. There is real research on it. Speaking your thoughts out loud, especially when you are working through something difficult, engages a separate part of the brain than silent thinking does. It activates the auditory feedback loop, which makes the thought more concrete and easier to actually evaluate. Athletes do it. Surgeons do it. People learning new languages do it. Self-directed speech is one of the most reliable, free, no-equipment tools for improving working memory and slowing down impulsive decisions. You hear yourself reasoning, and that creates a small gap between thought and action. And most good judgment lives in that gap. So if you talk yourself through your gym sets, or talk through your grocery list at the supermarket, or narrate what you are doing while cooking, your brain is sharper for it. The weird looks from strangers are just the cost of doing business. Eating cold leftover rice or pasta straight from the fridge. This one sounds like a sad student dinner, but it is genuinely better for your blood sugar than the same food eaten hot. When you cook starchy carbs like rice, pasta, or potatoes, and then let them cool down, a portion of the starch restructures into something called resistant starch. The molecule physically changes shape and becomes much harder for your small intestine to digest. What that means in practice is two things. First, that resistant starch passes through to your large intestine, where it gets fermented by your gut bacteria into short-chain fatty acids, like butyrate, which feed the cells lining your colon and support gut barrier function. Second, because less of the starch is being absorbed as fast glucose, your blood sugar response to that meal is noticeably lower than it would have been hot. People with insulin sensitivity issues genuinely benefit from this. Eating yesterday's rice, cold out of the container, is not laziness. It is mild metabolic optimization you stumbled into by being too tired to reheat. Even reheating after cooling keeps some of the resistant starch intact, so leftover rice is just a better food than fresh rice in this specific way. Sleeping with one foot outside the blanket. There is a reason almost everyone instinctively does this. Your body temperature has to drop by about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit to enter and maintain deep sleep. If your core stays too warm, your sleep gets shallower, you wake up more often, and you spend less time in the restorative stages where the body actually does its repair work. Your feet are one of the most efficient heat dumps in the entire body, because they are packed with blood vessels close to the surface called arteriovenous anastomosis, which can dilate and offload heat fast. Sticking one foot out from under the duvet is your body's way of fine-tuning its temperature without bothering to wake you up. It dumps just enough heat through the exposed foot to bring your core temperature down into the proper sleep zone. And it does this completely automatically. People who sleep in rooms that are too warm and stay fully covered tend to sleep worse and remember less of their dreams because they spend less time in REM. So that habit you have been doing your whole life is your body running a thermostat for you. Let it. Long, slow sighs when you are stressed. A real proper sigh, the kind where you take a slightly bigger breath in, then a small second breath on top of it, then a long, slow exhale all the way out, is one of the fastest known nervous system resets available to a human being. It has a name. It is called the physiological sigh, and it has actually been studied in pretty good detail in recent years. What happens mechanically is that the second small inhale reinflates collapsed alveoli at the very tops of the lungs, and then dumps out built-up carbon dioxide on the long exhale. That carbon dioxide is the part you are actually trying to get rid of, because rising CO2 is part of what triggers the feeling of panic and tightness in your chest when you are stressed. A few of those sighs in a row pulls your nervous system out of fight or flight faster than almost any breathing technique people pay good money for in apps. You can do it in a meeting, in traffic, in the middle of an awkward conversation, and nobody around you even notices it happened. People who do this naturally throughout the day often have lower baseline anxiety, not because they are calmer by nature, but because they keep resetting themselves all day long without realizing it. Doodling in meetings. This is the one that gets you the most judgment and deserves it the least. Doodling looks like distraction. It is the exact opposite. Studies on memory retention have repeatedly shown that people who doodle during a talk, lecture, or meeting actually remember significantly more of the content than people who sit there perfectly still, trying to look attentive. The reason is that the human brain genuinely struggles to stay locked onto a single passive input for very long. Without something else to occupy a small slice of attention, your mind drifts off hard into completely unrelated thoughts, and then you realize 20 minutes later that you have no idea what was just said. Doodling occupies just enough of your motor cortex to keep your brain from wandering off completely, while leaving the language and memory parts of the brain free to absorb everything coming in. It is the same principle as people who learn better while pacing or chewing gum. So the kid in school who got told off for drawing in the margins was probably retaining way more than the kid who sat there looking attentive while secretly daydreaming about the weekend. If you have meetings, you actually have to sit through, doodle. Your boss does not know it, but you're paying better attention than they are. Fruits. Fruits are one of the few foods that almost nobody actually needs to overthink. They are nutrient-dense, full of fiber, full of water, full of vitamins, and full of antioxidants. And the fiber in fruit is the reason that the sugar inside it does not behave the way people think it does. When you eat a whole apple, the fiber slows down how fast that sugar enters your bloodstream, which means your blood glucose goes up gently instead of spiking, your liver handles it without drama, your insulin response stays reasonable, and you feel full for a decent amount of time afterwards. That is the whole point of eating fruit in its original form. Berries help with brain health and inflammation. Citrus fruits load you up with vitamin C and help your body actually absorb iron from plant foods. Bananas give you potassium and quick energy, which is why they show up in basically every pre-workout meal on earth. Apples and pears are loaded with soluble fiber that feeds your gut bacteria. There is genuinely very little to complain about with whole fruit. The thing people get wrong is fruit juice. The moment you juice a fruit, you remove the fiber, the pulp, and most of the chewing-related satiety cues that made fruit feel like a real meal in the first place. What you are left with is sugar water with a small dose of vitamins floating in it. A glass of orange juice can easily contain the sugar of 3 or 4 oranges and almost none of the volume, none of the fiber, and none of the fullness. Your liver gets hit with a fast wave of fructose, your blood sugar spikes. You drink it in 20 seconds and feel hungry again half an hour later. And the marketing on these bottles is incredible. Made with real fruit, 100% natural, packed with vitamin C, all of that can technically be true while the drink is still behaving in your body more like a soda than like a piece of fruit. Smoothies are a slightly better case because they keep some of the fiber but only if the fruit is blended whole and not strained. A green juice from a juice bar with apple, pineapple and orange in it is closer to dessert than to a health drink. Eat the fruit, drink the water. The two were never meant to be combined into one fast-absorbing sugary liquid. Vegetables. Vegetables are the closest thing to a free pass that exists in nutrition. High volume, low calories, packed with fiber, packed with vitamins and minerals, packed with antioxidants and plant compounds that influence everything from blood pressure to gut health to inflammation. Leafy greens like spinach, kale, and arugula give you folate, vitamin K, magnesium, and a stack of antioxidants for almost no calories. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage contain sulforaphane and other compounds linked to reduced cancer risk and better detoxification through the liver. Root vegetables like carrots, beets, and sweet potatoes carry more carbohydrate but also more steady energy and slow-releasing fiber. Allium vegetables like onions, garlic, and leeks have antibacterial and cardiovascular benefits that have been studied for decades. The fiber in vegetables does most of the heavy lifting. It feeds your gut bacteria, regulates your blood sugar response to other foods you eat alongside it, keeps your bowel movements normal, and lowers your overall calorie density so you can eat a genuinely large meal without overshooting your needs. That is why people who eat a lot of vegetables tend to stay leaner without much effort. The volume fills them up before the calorie count catches them. The downsides are minimal. Some people get bloated when they suddenly jump from eating almost no vegetables to eating a pile of broccoli and beans in one meal. But that is an adaptation issue, not a vegetable problem. Your gut bacteria need a few weeks to catch up. People with specific conditions like IBS sometimes struggle with high FODMAP vegetables like garlic and onions. But for the general population, the more vegetables you eat, the better basically every health marker gets. Grains. Grains are where the conversation gets messier because the word grain covers everything from a bowl of steel-cut oats to a slice of white sandwich bread. And those two foods do completely different things to your body. Whole grains, the ones where the bran, germ and endosperm are all still intact, give you slow digesting carbohydrates, fiber, B vitamins, magnesium, iron, and a steady release of energy. Oats, quinoa, brown rice, buckwheat, barley, whole wheat, farro. These foods stabilize your blood sugar, keep you full, support gut health through their fiber, and have been consistently linked to lower rates of heart disease and type 2 diabetes in long-term studies. They are not exciting, they are not magical, but they are useful, and they have always been useful. Refined grains are the problem. The moment you strip the bran and germ off a grain, you have removed most of the fiber, most of the vitamins, and most of the minerals. You are left with a starchy middle, which behaves in your body almost exactly like sugar. White bread, white rice, most pasta, most breakfast cereals, crackers, pastries, anything made with refined flour. Your blood sugar spikes faster, your insulin response is bigger, your satiety is much lower, and you end up eating more total food because the refined version did not signal fullness the way the whole version would have. That is the actual mechanism behind why so many people eating high-grain diets struggle with weight. It is not the grains themselves. It is the version of the grains. A bowl of oatmeal and a bowl of frosted cereal are technically both grain-based breakfasts, and they do not even play in the same league when it comes to what happens inside your body for the next 4 hours. Dairy. Dairy is one of those food groups that some people thrive on and some people quietly suffer through without realizing it. For the people who tolerate it well, dairy is a genuinely useful food. It is one of the best sources of calcium on earth. It contains high-quality complete protein, it has vitamin D when fortified, it carries phosphorus, potassium, and B12, and the fat in full-fat dairy actually helps you absorb the fat-soluble vitamins inside it. Greek yogurt and kefir give you live probiotic bacteria that support your gut. Cheese gives you concentrated protein and fat that keeps you full for hours. Milk has been a staple for almost every dairy-producing culture for thousands of years, for a reason. The problem is that a significant portion of the world's adult population does not produce enough lactase, the enzyme that breaks down the sugar in milk, which means dairy gives them bloating, gas, cramping, and bathroom problems they have learned to live with for years, without ever connecting the dots. Lactose intolerance is wildly underdiagnosed because people just assume their stomach is always going to feel a little weird after cereal. The other issue is that a lot of dairy products on shelves are basically dessert-wearing health branding. Flavored yogurts often contain more sugar per serving than ice cream. Milk-based coffee drinks at chains can hit 50 to 70 grams of sugar in one cup. Cream cheese spreads, dessert puddings, sweetened milks, all of it gets sold under the dairy halo, while doing none of the things plain dairy does for you. Plain Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, kefir, and unsweetened milk are useful foods. The flavored, sweetened, dessert-style dairy is a different category entirely, and your body knows the difference. And while you're thinking about all this, the truth is that most people who want to get in shape are not failing because they don't know what's good for them. They're failing because the food they're eating is boring, and they cannot stick to it. That is the entire reason Summer Shred exists. It is a 6-week personalized program built specifically for you to get in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of the Bland is Banned cookbook, which is 102 high-protein recipes that actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, normal food, just built so it gets you leaner without making you miserable. Both are half price right now, while the launch sale is still on. First link in the description. Meat. Meat is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can put in your body, and also one of the most misunderstood. A serving of beef, pork, lamb, or poultry gives you a complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids, highly absorbable iron in the heme form, zinc, B12, B6, selenium, and creatine. The protein in meat is what your body uses to repair muscle, maintain hair and skin and nails, build enzymes and hormones, and support your immune system. There is no plant food that matches the bioavailability of the nutrients in meat. That is just biochemistry. Iron from beef gets absorbed at around 15 to 35%, while iron from spinach gets absorbed at around 2 to 20%, depending on what you eat it with. B12 essentially does not exist in plant foods in any meaningful amount. This is why people who go fully plant-based without careful supplementation often run into deficiencies after a year or two. The nuance is around processing. Unprocessed meat, meaning a chicken breast, a piece of steak, a pork chop, a lamb shoulder, cooked at home, is a fundamentally different food from processed meat like bacon, sausages, hot dogs, deli ham, salami, and most fast food meat. Processed meats are preserved with nitrates, nitrites, and large amounts of sodium. And the long-term studies linking meat to cancer and heart disease are mostly looking at processed meat specifically, not at a grilled steak. Cooking method matters too. Charring meat to a black crust at very high temperatures creates compounds that are not great for you in large repeated doses. That does not mean a barbecue is going to kill you. It means heavily processed meat eaten constantly is not the same as a piece of unprocessed meat eaten with vegetables a few times a week. The two get lumped together in headlines, and the two are not the same food. Fish and seafood. Fish and seafood are probably the most underrated food group on this entire list. Fatty fish, like salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, and anchovies, are one of the only real food sources of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, which your body uses for brain function, eye health, cardiovascular health, and reducing systemic inflammation. The omega-3s in flax seeds and chia seeds are a shorter form that your body has to convert, and the conversion rate is something like 5 to 10% at best. So eating fish twice a week genuinely does something that almost no other food does. Lean fish like cod, haddock, tilapia, and white sea bass give you high-quality protein with very few calories, which makes them excellent for fat loss without losing muscle. Shellfish like oysters, mussels, clams, and scallops are some of the most mineral-dense foods on Earth. Oysters in particular pack absurd amounts of zinc, B12, and selenium into a few small bites. The trade-off is mercury and other contaminants in some species. Large predatory fish that live longer, like swordfish, king mackerel, shark, and some tuna, accumulate more mercury in their tissues. Over time, eating these constantly is not ideal, particularly during pregnancy. Smaller fish lower on the food chain, like sardines and anchovies, have very little mercury and are some of the cleanest and most nutritious choices you can make. The other thing worth mentioning is farmed versus wild. The difference matters less than people online make it out to, but farmed salmon does tend to have a different fatty acid profile and sometimes lower omega-3 content depending on what the fish were fed. Either is still useful. Wild is just slightly better when you can get it. Eggs. Eggs are the food that got demonized hardest by the low-fat era and have spent the last 20 years quietly being vindicated by basically every modern study on them. One egg gives you about 6 grams of complete protein, choline for brain and liver health, lutein and zeaxanthin for eye health, selenium, B12, vitamin D, and a small amount of basically every nutrient your body needs. The yolk is where most of those nutrients live, which is why throwing the yolk out and eating only the white is one of the most aggressively pointless habits in the fitness world. You are paying for the nutrients and then putting them in the bin. The cholesterol panic around eggs was based on the assumption that dietary cholesterol raised blood cholesterol in a one-to-one way, and that turned out to be largely wrong for most people. Your liver makes most of the cholesterol in your body, and when you eat more cholesterol from food, your liver makes less of it to compensate. There is a small subset of people called hyperresponders whose blood cholesterol does noticeably go up when they eat a lot of eggs. But for the general population, 2 to 3 eggs a day is not the heart attack on a plate it was made out to be in the 90s. Eggs are filling, cheap, easy to cook, and pack more usable nutrition per calorie than almost any other food in the grocery store. Legumes and beans. Legumes and beans cover lentils, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, navy beans, soybeans, peas, peanuts, and a few others. As a group, they are one of the cheapest and most nutritionally efficient foods on Earth. They give you plant protein, slow digesting carbohydrates, large amounts of fiber, folate, magnesium, iron, and potassium. The fiber in beans does serious work for your gut. It feeds the bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, which help maintain the gut lining and keep inflammation down. The combination of protein and fiber also means beans keep you full for hours, which is why diets built around legumes tend to leave people noticeably satisfied, even on lower calorie intakes. The protein in legumes is technically incomplete, meaning most legumes are low in 1 or 2 essential amino acids. This is a non-issue if you are eating any variety of food across the day, because you don't need every amino acid in the same meal. The body manages it just fine. The actual downside is the same one as with cruciferous vegetables. The fermentable fibers can cause bloating and gas if your gut is not used to them. Soaking and cooking beans properly reduces some of the anti-nutrients, like phytic acid, that can interfere with mineral absorption, which is why traditional cuisines that built around beans always involved soaking, sprouting, or long cooking times. Canned beans are fine for convenience as long as you rinse them to drop the sodium content. Nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are calorie-dense, which scares people, but the calorie density is exactly why they are useful. They give you healthy fats, plant protein, fiber, magnesium, vitamin E, and a stack of minerals in a small physical volume. Almonds give you vitamin E and magnesium. Walnuts have plant-based omega-3Es. Brazil nuts have so much selenium that 2 or 3 of them cover your daily needs. Pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds are loaded with zinc and magnesium. Chia seeds and flax seeds give you fiber and omega-3s. The fats in nuts are mostly monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, which are the ones consistently linked to better cardiovascular health. The mistake people make with nuts is treating them like a free snack. A handful of almonds is around 160 to 200 calories, and it is extremely easy to absent-mindedly eat 4 handfuls while watching TV without registering you just ate 800 calories of almonds. That is not the nuts' fault. That is a portion problem. Nut butters have the same issue, and most commercial peanut butters and almond butters add sugar, oils, and salt on top of what was already a calorie-dense food. The cleaner ones list only one ingredient on the back, the nut. The other thing worth flagging is rancidity. Nuts and seeds contain a lot of polyunsaturated fat, which goes off when exposed to heat, light, and air. If your bag of walnuts tastes bitter or sharp, the fats have oxidized, and you should not be eating them. Store them in the fridge or freezer if you don't go through them quickly. Oils and fats. Oils and fats are the food group that confuses people the most, because the messaging has flipped back and forth so many times in the last 50 years. Here is the short version. Your body needs fat. Fat is not what makes you fat. Excess calories make you fat. Fat is what your body uses to build cell membranes, produce hormones including testosterone and estrogen, absorb the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and insulate your nerves. Without enough fat in your diet, your hormones get worse, your skin gets worse, your hair gets worse, and your absorption of certain vitamins drops off a cliff. The kind of fat matters. Olive oil, particularly extra virgin, is one of the most studied and most consistently beneficial fats on earth. Monounsaturated, antioxidant-rich, anti-inflammatory, and the foundation of basically every long lifespan dietary pattern that has ever been studied. Avocado oil is similar. Coconut oil is fine in moderation, mostly saturated fat, useful for high heat cooking. Butter and ghee are also fine in normal amounts. Animal fats from quality sources are not the dietary villain they were made out to be in the 1980s. The actual problematic fats are the heavily refined industrial seed oils, like cottonseed oil, soybean oil, corn oil, and most generic vegetable oil, especially when they have been heated repeatedly in deep fryers and reused for days. Those create oxidized compounds that are inflammatory and that your body genuinely does not handle well over time. The other category to be careful with is trans fats, which are partially hydrogenated oils used in margarines, baked goods, and processed snacks. Most countries have banned or restricted them at this point, but they still appear in some products, and they are the one type of fat that pretty much every researcher agrees is bad for you, in any amount. Creatine monohydrate. This is the one supplement that has been studied so many times that even the most cynical researchers in the field stopped arguing about it. Creatine works. It helps your muscles produce energy faster during short, hard efforts like lifting weights, sprinting, or anything explosive. That is why people who take it can usually do an extra rep or two, recover slightly faster between sets, and over months end up with a bit more muscle than they would have built otherwise. It is not magic, and it is not a steroid, no matter how many gym uncles try to tell you it is basically the same thing. It is just a compound your body already uses, except now you are giving it more of it. The dose is simple, 3 to 5 grams a day, every day. Taken whenever you want. You do not need to load it, you do not need to cycle off it, you do not need the fancy versions with creatine HCl or creatine ethyl ester or whatever new label they slapped on it to charge you triple. Plain monohydrate is the one that has the studies behind it, and it costs almost nothing. The only people who should be a little careful are people with existing kidney issues, but for healthy adults, it is one of the safest supplements that exists. Side effects are pretty much limited to slight water retention in the muscles, which is actually part of why it works, and the occasional person who feels mildly bloated for a week before their body settles into it. Caffeine. Caffeine is in the same tier as creatine in terms of how well it actually works, except people stop seeing it as a supplement because it is in coffee. It is still a supplement. It is one of the most studied performance enhancers on the planet. It improves focus, reaction time, endurance, and how hard you can push yourself in the gym before your brain starts whining about how tired you are. That is why pretty much every pre-workout on earth is mostly caffeine, with a bunch of cheaper ingredients dumped around it for flavor and marketing. The useful dose is somewhere between 3 and 6 milligrams per kilo of body weight, taken about 30 to 60 minutes before training. For most people, that lands somewhere between 200 and 400 milligrams. Anything above that, and you are mostly just buying yourself a racing heart and a worse sleep. And that is the catch with caffeine. The benefit is real, but the cost is real too. Caffeine taken too late in the day will mess with your sleep even if you swear it does not, because the half-life is around 5 to 6 hours. Sleep is doing more for your physique and your training than caffeine ever will. So if the two are fighting, sleep wins. The other thing nobody mentions is that tolerance builds quickly. If you are drinking pre-workout daily, plus 2 coffees, plus an energy drink in the afternoon, you are not getting a performance boost anymore. You are just getting baseline, so you do not feel half dead. Protein powder. Protein powder is not really a supplement in the magical sense. It is just convenient food in powder form. It works because protein works, not because the powder itself is doing something special to your body. But it earns its spot on this list because most people who want to build muscle or lose fat are not actually hitting enough protein, and powder makes that problem way easier to solve. One scoop is usually 20 to 25 grams of protein for around 100 to 120 calories, which is a ratio you basically cannot match with whole food, except for stuff like chicken breast and egg whites. Whey is the most studied, absorbs fast, and is great around workouts. And at breakfast, casein is slower digesting and works fine too, especially before bed, if that matters to you. Plant-based blends are decent if you use a proper blend, like pea plus rice, not just one isolated plant protein. The thing protein powder does not need to be is expensive, fancy, or filled with 20 added ingredients claiming to help your gut, or your hair, or your testosterone. You want a clean label, a high protein per serving number, and a taste you actually like enough to drink every day. That is it. If you are getting all your protein from food already, you do not need it. Most people are not, so it helps. This is also where most people fall apart, by the way. They take the supplement, they hit the gym, but they cannot put together a single meal that is high in protein and actually tastes good. That is the entire reason Bland is Banned exists. It is 102 recipes built around high protein, lower calorie food that tastes like normal food you would actually want to eat. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts. The kind of stuff you assume you have to give up the second you decide to get in shape. It is half price right now. And if you want the full thing, Summer Shred is the 6-week program designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. First link in the description. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is one of the few vitamins where deficiency is genuinely common, and supplementation genuinely matters. Your body makes it from sunlight on bare skin, which is fine if you live somewhere sunny and spend a normal amount of time outside without being fully covered. For everyone else, which is most of the modern population, blood levels tend to sit somewhere between low and very low. And low vitamin D is associated with worse immune function, worse mood, worse bone health, worse muscle function, and in some studies, worse insulin sensitivity. The dose most people benefit from is between 1000 and 4000 IU per day. Some people need more if they are heavily deficient, but that is something you would ideally check with a blood test rather than guessing. Vitamin D is fat soluble, so it absorbs better when you take it with a meal that contains some fat. Taking it dry on an empty stomach is mostly wasted. And unlike most supplements where the effect is subtle, people who are actually deficient often notice a real change in energy, sleep, and how often they get sick once their levels come back up. The people who do not notice anything are usually people who already had decent levels to start with, which is fine. You still want to keep them there. Omega-3. Omega-3s, specifically EPA and DHA from fish oil or algae oil, are one of those supplements that nobody gets hyped about because the benefits are quiet and slow. But they are real. Omega-3s help with inflammation, joint health, cardiovascular markers, brain function, and in some studies, mood. The reason most people need to supplement is that the modern diet is loaded with omega-6 from seed oils and packaged food, and very low in omega-3, which throws the ratio off in a way the body does not love. The dose worth taking is somewhere between 1 and 3 grams of combined EPA and DHA per day, not 1 and 3 grams of fish oil total. That is a common label trick. A bottle will say 1200 milligrams of fish oil per soft gel, and only 300 of that is actually the EPA and DHA that does anything. Read the back of the bottle, not the front. If you eat fatty fish like salmon, sardines, or mackerel 2 or 3 times a week, you probably do not need it. If you do not, supplementation is one of the easiest and cheapest health upgrades you can make. Magnesium. Magnesium is another one where deficiency is more common than people think, partly because soil quality has dropped over the decades, and partly because modern diets are heavy on processed food, which strips out a lot of the magnesium that whole foods naturally contain. Low magnesium is linked to worse sleep, more muscle cramps, higher anxiety, worse blood sugar control, and worse recovery from exercise. The dose that helps most people is 200 to 400 milligrams per day, but the form actually matters here, which is rare for supplements. Magnesium oxide is the cheap one most multivitamins use, and your body absorbs almost none of it. Magnesium citrate is decent, although it can have a laxative effect at higher doses. Magnesium glycinate is the one most people end up landing on because it absorbs well, is gentle on the stomach, and tends to help with sleep. Specifically, magnesium threonate is the one being marketed as the brain version. And while there is some early research behind it, it is also significantly more expensive without a huge difference in real-world benefit for most people. Take it in the evening if sleep is what you care about most. Take it with food, either way. Vitamin B12. B12 is a supplement that matters a lot for a small group of people, and almost not at all for everyone else, which is the opposite of how it is usually marketed. If you eat meat, eggs or dairy regularly, you are almost certainly getting enough B12 from food. The people who actually need to supplement are vegans, vegetarians who do not eat eggs or dairy often, older adults whose absorption naturally drops with age, and people on certain medications like metformin or long-term acid blockers that interfere with B12 uptake. For those people, the difference is genuinely noticeable. B12 deficiency causes fatigue, brain fog, tingling in the hands and feet, mood issues, and in severe cases nerve damage that can become permanent if it is left long enough. The supplement dose is usually somewhere between 250 micrograms and 1000 micrograms a few times a week, which sounds like a huge number compared to other vitamins. But B12 absorption is weirdly inefficient. The two forms worth knowing are methylcobalamin and cyanocobalamin. Both work. Methylcobalamin is the one most people end up taking. If you are not in one of the at-risk groups, you probably do not need it, and taking it anyway will not hurt, but will not do much either. Electrolytes. Electrolytes are sodium, potassium, magnesium, and a few others that your body uses to regulate hydration, muscle contraction, and nerve signaling. The reason they earn a spot on a supplements that actually work list is because the average person is told for their entire life to drink more water and eat less salt, which for a lot of people creates the exact problem electrolyte supplements solve. You drink a ton of water, you sweat a lot in training, you eat a fairly clean diet that is naturally low in sodium, and now your electrolyte levels are off and you feel tired, lightheaded, crampy, or like your workouts have no juice in them. The supplement does not have to be fancy. A pinch of salt and a squeeze of lemon in water works. A proper electrolyte mix works too, if you actually train hard or sweat a lot. The dose depends entirely on how much you are sweating, how much sodium your food already has, and how active you are. The people who benefit most are people training hard in heat, people on low-carb diets, and people who feel weirdly drained after long workouts, even though they are eating and sleeping fine. The people who probably do not need it are people eating a normal mixed diet who are not doing much intense exercise. Your body is usually handling it. Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is one of the very few adaptogens with actual human studies behind it, rather than just vague tradition and clever marketing. The research is mostly on stress, anxiety, sleep quality, and in some studies testosterone and exercise recovery. The effects are not huge, but they are consistent enough that it earns a real spot on this list rather than the supplement graveyard most herbal products belong to. The dose used in most of the positive studies is around 300 to 600 milligrams of a standardized extract, usually KSM 66 or Sensoril, taken once or twice a day. Generic ashwagandha powder at random doses from a random brand is not the same product as what was used in the research, which is something supplement companies count on you not knowing. The benefits usually show up after a few weeks of consistent use, not the first day, and they are subtle. Slightly calmer baseline, slightly better sleep, slightly better recovery. It is not going to change your life, but for people dealing with chronic stress or training hard while life is stressful, it is one of the few herbal supplements that is actually doing something measurable. Fiber. Fiber supplements are an underrated entry on a list like this, because nobody thinks of fiber as exciting. It is not. It is also one of the most consistently useful supplements you can take if your diet is light on vegetables, fruit, beans, or whole grains, which describes a large percentage of people. Fiber feeds your gut bacteria, slows digestion, improves blood sugar control, helps cholesterol levels, and keeps everything moving in the bathroom department, which sounds unglamorous until it becomes a problem. The two main types worth knowing are soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber, like psyllium husk, forms a gel in the gut and is the one most people benefit from supplementing because it helps with cholesterol, blood sugar, and stool consistency. At the same time, insoluble fiber adds bulk and speeds transit. Most fiber supplements are some mix. The dose worth aiming for is somewhere between 5 and 15 grams of supplemental fiber, on top of whatever you are getting from food. And it has to be introduced gradually unless you want your stomach to file a formal complaint. Drink plenty of water with it. Otherwise, it does the opposite of what you wanted. Ideally, you get your fiber from food. But if your food intake is not there yet, this is one of the few supplements where the gap can be real. and the supplement can genuinely help close it. Drink a full glass of water before your coffee. Most people wake up already mildly dehydrated because you just spent 8 hours not drinking anything. And then the first thing you do is pour a substance that makes you pee more. So you start your day digging the hole deeper. A glass of water before the coffee fixes a shocking amount of stuff that people blame on bigger problems. That mid-morning headache, that weird brain fog at 10 a.m., that tiredness you keep trying to caffeine your way out of. A lot of the time, it was never a sleep problem or a focus problem. You were just a bit dried out and your brain was complaining about it. It costs you about 15 seconds and it is genuinely one of the highest return things you can do before you have even made a single real decision that day. Stop eating in front of a screen. This one sounds soft until you understand what is actually happening. When you eat while watching something, your brain is busy, and the busy brain does a terrible job of registering that you ate. The fullness signal still fires, you just are not home to receive it. So you finish the meal, the show is still going, and your hand keeps reaching because nothing in your head said stop. People think they have a willpower problem or a portion problem. A lot of the time, they just have an attention problem. Eat the meal as the meal. Look at the food. It feels strange for about 2 days, and then it feels normal. And you will be surprised how much less you want afterwards when you were actually present for the thing you just ate. Get sunlight on your face within an hour of waking. Your body has an internal clock, and that clock is mostly set by light hitting your eyes early. When you wake up and go straight from a dark bedroom to a dim hallway to a screen, your body never gets the clear signal that the day has started. So your energy stays flat in the morning and then refuses to switch off at night. People treat that as a sleep problem and start buying things to fix it. The fix is free and it is outside. 10 minutes of actual daylight, even on a gray miserable day, even just standing near a window with it open. You are not doing it for vitamin D, although that is a bonus. You are doing it to tell your brain what time it is. Morning light is basically the start button for the whole day. Put your fork down between bites. I know this sounds like something a posh aunt would tell you, but it works for a stupidly simple reason. It takes your gut around 20 minutes to tell your brain it is full. If you shovel a meal in 8 minutes, you have eaten way past the point of enough before the message even arrives, and then you spend the next half hour feeling overstuffed and slightly regretful. Putting the fork down is just a way to slow the whole thing down, without having to think about it. You are not eating less on purpose. You are eating at a speed where your body actually gets a vote. Most people who think they overeat do not have a hunger problem, they have a speed problem. Walk for 10 minutes after you eat. A short walk after a meal does something genuinely useful. When you eat, your blood sugar rises, and a gentle walk pulls some of that sugar into your muscles, instead of letting it spike and crash. That spike and crash is the thing behind the heavy, sleepy, useless feeling an hour after lunch. The one you keep blaming on the meal being too big, or on you being lazy. It was often just your blood sugar doing a roller coaster. 10 minutes. Not a workout, not a thing you change clothes for. Just a walk around the block, while you are on the phone anyway. It is one of the rare things that is almost too easy to be worth this much. While we are talking about food that does not wreck you, this is a good moment to mention this. Most people assume that eating to get in shape means signing up for a life of dry chicken and sad steamed vegetables. That is exactly the problem the Bland is Banned cookbook was built to solve. It is high protein, lower calorie food that actually tastes like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, proper meals you would want to eat anyway. And right now, it is half price. If you want the full version of that, there is Summer Shred, Chef Caleb's 6-week program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, and it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. Both are linked in the description. The whole point is getting leaner while eating food you actually enjoy. Anyway, back to it. Brush your teeth before breakfast, not after. This one feels backwards, so stick with me. When you eat, especially anything acidic like orange juice, coffee, or fruit, the acid temporarily softens the enamel on your teeth. If you brush right after, you are scrubbing enamel while it is at its softest, and over years, that quietly wears your teeth down. Brushing before breakfast gets rid of the overnight bacteria, and means you are not attacking soft enamel. If brushing after a meal feels too ingrained to drop, at least just rinse with water, and wait half an hour. People spend a fortune on their teeth later in life. Some of that damage was a free habit done at the wrong time of day. Stop charging your phone next to your bed, not because of some vague radiation worry, because of the simple fact that if it is within arm's reach, you will use it. You will check it last thing at night, you will check it when you stir at 3 a.m., and you will check it the second your eyes open. That is 3 separate hits of stimulation bolted onto the most fragile parts of your sleep. Move the charger across the room. Now getting the phone requires standing up, and that tiny bit of friction is enough to stop most of the late night and middle of the night scrolling. People think they have an insomnia problem. Sometimes they just have a phone that is too close to their pillow. Eat protein at breakfast specifically. A lot of standard breakfasts are basically just sugar and beige carbs. Cereal, toast, a pastry, Juice, it tastes nice and then it sends your blood sugar straight up and straight down. And 90 minutes later, you're starving and reaching for a snack you did not really plan on. Protein at breakfast changes the whole shape of your day. It keeps you full, it flattens that crash, and it quietly stops the 11 a.m. snack attack that you keep blaming on a lack of discipline. Eggs, Greek yogurt, a bit of leftover meat, whatever fits your morning. You are not eating more food, you're just front-loading the kind of food that keeps you steady instead of the kind that sets a trap for later. Take the stairs when it is 2 floors or fewer. This is not a fitness tip pretending to replace exercise. It will not. It is more of a mindset thing. Most people are looking for one big dramatic gesture. The gym membership, the program, the Monday they will finally change everything. And while they wait for the big gesture, they take the lift for 1 floor. The stairs habit is small on its own, but it rewires something. It teaches you to stop outsourcing every tiny bit of effort. Over a week, it adds up to real movement. Over a month, it adds up to a slightly different person, one who does not automatically pick the easiest option every single time. It is less about the calories and more about the pattern. Stop drinking your calories. This is probably the single most invisible problem on the list. A juice, a fancy coffee, a couple of sodas, a couple of beers. None of it feels like eating, so your brain files it under nothing. But liquid calories barely register as fullness, which means you drink 500 calories and you are just as hungry as before. Then you eat a full meal on top. People genuinely cannot work out why the weight is not moving when they feel like they are eating sensibly. They are just drinking the problem. You do not have to go full monk about it. Just notice it. Water, black coffee, tea, sparkling water if you want something with a bit of life to it. The food side often sorts itself out once the drinks stop quietly sabotaging you. Go to bed and wake up at roughly the same time, even on weekends. I know the weekend lie-in feels sacred, but here is the thing nobody enjoys hearing. Sleeping until noon on Saturday and Sunday is basically giving yourself jet lag without leaving the country. Your body clock drifts, and then Monday morning feels like you flew in from another time zone. Because in a sense, your body did. Keeping your sleep and wake times roughly steady, give or take an hour, means Monday stops feeling like a wall you walk into. People blame Monday for being Monday. A decent chunk of that feeling is just self-inflicted by the weekend schedule. Consistency beats quantity here, more than people want to believe. Add 1 vegetable to a meal you already eat. Notice, I did not say overhaul your diet or start eating salads you secretly hate. Most healthy eating attempts die because people try to become a completely different person on a Monday, and that person does not last till Thursday. So do not, just take a meal you already make and reliably eat, and add 1 vegetable to it. Spinach into the eggs, a handful of something green next to the dinner, peppers thrown into whatever you were already cooking. It is small enough that there is no real resistance to it, which is exactly why it survives. Big diet overhauls fail loudly, tiny additions stick quietly, and quiet things that stick will always beat dramatic things that collapse. Stand up and move every hour you are sitting. Sitting still for hours does something sneaky. It is not just bad posture. Your circulation slows, your muscles essentially switch off, your blood sugar handling gets worse, and your hips and lower back stiffen into the shape of the chair. The fix is not a standing desk or anything you have to buy. It is just standing up once an hour and moving for 2 minutes. Walk to get water, do a lap of the room, whatever. People treat the stiff back and the afternoon slump as some mysterious aging thing. A lot of it is just a body that has been frozen in one position for too long and would quite like to be reminded it can move. Put the snacks where you cannot see them. Your environment beats your willpower nearly every time, and pretending otherwise is how people lose this fight for years. If the biscuits are on the counter, you will eat the biscuits, not because you are weak, but because you walk past them 40 times a day, and every single pass is a tiny decision you have to win. Eventually, you lose one, and then you have lost the habit. So do not rely on winning 40 decisions. Just move the snacks. Top shelf, back of the cupboard, out of sight. And put the fruit or the nuts where the biscuits used to be. You have not banned anything. You have just made the good choice, the lazy choice, and the bad choice the effortful one. That quiet swap does more than any amount of grim discipline. Actually, stop eating when you are full instead of when the plate is empty. This is last because it is the one that ties the whole list together. A lot of us were raised to finish the plate. Clean plate, good boy. Do not waste food. And that rule completely overrides the much older, much smarter signal your body has been sending you the whole time, which is the one that says, I have had enough now. The plate does not know how hungry you are. The plate was filled before you took a single bite. So when you feel that gentle full signal arrive, that is the moment to stop, not the moment the plate happens to be empty. The leftovers will keep. Your body will not send you a thank you note, but it will quietly stop carrying weight it never needed. And that is the note. Fast metabolism. Some people walk around eating like a garbage disposal and never gain a pound, and the rest of us quietly resent them. If that's you, you probably have a naturally high metabolic rate, which mostly comes down to a few things. You might have more lean mass than average, you might fidget constantly without realizing it, and your body might just burn more energy keeping itself running at rest. There's a real measured thing called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically all the calories you burn tapping your foot, standing up, pacing while on the phone, and generally never sitting still. Some people's bodies are wired to do way more of that automatically. The gift here is obvious. Staying lean takes less effort, but here's the part nobody tells the fast metabolism crowd. It can make you lazy with food quality because you can get away with eating absolute trash for years and the mirror won't punish you. The fat doesn't show up, the damage on the inside still does. So if this is you, the gift is the freedom, not an excuse to eat like a raccoon. Good muscle insertions. This one is pure genetic luck, and there is basically nothing you can do to earn it. Muscle insertions are where your muscles attach to the bone, and where exactly that attachment sits changes how full and complete a muscle looks. Some people have biceps that attach low, near the elbow, which means even a small bicep looks like it fills the whole arm. Other people have a gap there no matter how much they train, because their muscle just attaches higher up. Same with calves. Some people have calf muscle that runs almost all the way down to the ankle, and they look jacked from the knee down, without ever training calves once. Other people do calf raises religiously for years, and stay looking like they're standing on two pencils. If you've got good insertions, you got handed a head start in how trained your body looks for the same amount of actual work. It's not fair. It was never going to be fair. But knowing this should also take some pressure off, because if your calves never grow no matter what, it might genuinely not be your fault. High pain tolerance. A lot of people who are great at training endurance sports or just grinding through hard physical work have a nervous system that's a little less dramatic about discomfort. Pain tolerance has a real genetic component. There are gene variants that affect how strongly you perceive pain signals and how quickly your body produces its own natural painkillers. If you've got the favorable version, hard sets feel hard, but they don't feel like the end of the world, which means you can push closer to your actual limit before your brain slams the brakes. That's a genuine athletic advantage. It's also a bit of a trap, because the same wiring that lets you push through a brutal workout also lets you push through an injury that you really should have stopped and dealt with. So the gift comes with a warning label. Tolerating pain is useful. Ignoring pain is how people end up needing surgery. Efficient sleep. Most people need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours. And if they don't get it, they fall apart. But there is a small group of people, and it really is small, who carry a rare gene variant that lets them function fully on around 6 hours or even less, with no measurable downside. These are actual short sleepers, not people who think they're short sleepers because they've been running on caffeine and denial for a decade. Real short sleepers wake up genuinely refreshed and stay sharp all day. If you're one of them, you've effectively been handed extra hours of life every single week, which is a ridiculous gift. But this is also the most commonly faked genetic gift on earth, because almost everyone who says they only need 5 hours is just chronically sleep deprived and used to it. So before you claim this one, be honest. If you crash hard on weekends, or you'd sleep 10 hours given the chance, you don't have the gene. You have a problem, and while we're talking about your body quietly running on its own settings, here's something worth knowing. A lot of people assume that if they're not genetically gifted, getting in shape has to mean suffering through bland, miserable diet food. It doesn't. That's the whole reason Bland is Banned exists. It's a cookbook full of high-protein, lower-calorie meals that actually taste like real food, the kind of stuff you genuinely want to eat. So getting leaner doesn't feel like a punishment. It's half price right now, and if you want the full structure, Summer Shred is a 6-week program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned, included. First link in the description. Good tendon and joint structure. Some people are just built sturdy, their tendons attach well, their joints track cleanly, their connective tissue is naturally tougher, and they can train hard for decades without the nagging injuries that follow other people around like a bad smell. A lot of this is genetic. Things like collagen production, the natural shape of your hip and shoulder sockets, and how your ligaments are wired all influence how much your body can take. If you've got this gift, you might not even notice it, because the gift is the absence of a problem. No chronic knee pain, no shoulder that flares up every time you bench. You just train, recover, and keep going. The flip side is that people with bulletproof joints often have terrible form and get away with it for years, right up until they don't. Good structure buys you a long runway. It doesn't make you immortal. Naturally high testosterone. Within the normal healthy range, some men sit naturally higher than others. And that comes partly down to genetics affecting how their body produces and uses hormones. Higher natural testosterone, still within a normal range, tends to mean building muscle comes a bit easier, recovery is a bit faster, motivation and drive run a bit higher, And body fat is a bit easier to manage. It's a quiet advantage that shows up across the whole picture. But here's the honest part. A lot of what people blame on low genetic testosterone is actually just lifestyle wrecking their hormones. Bad sleep, carrying too much body fat, never training, chronic stress, and barely moving will all tank testosterone regardless of your genetics. So if you suspect you're on the lower end, the answer isn't to feel doomed. Most people have far more room to improve their hormonal health through basic habits than they think. The genetic gift is real, but it's a smaller slice of the pie than the internet wants you to believe. A strong appetite signal. This sounds like the opposite of a gift, but stay with me. Some people have a very accurate, very honest appetite. They feel genuinely hungry when their body actually needs food, and they feel genuinely full when they've had enough, and they naturally stop. Their hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, send clear signals that their brain actually listens to. If that's you, congratulations, because intuitive eating actually works for you, and you can mostly trust your own body to regulate itself. A huge number of people do not have this. Their fullness signal is broken or delayed. They eat well past the point of needing it, and they're hungry again an hour later for no good reason. If your appetite is honest and well calibrated, you've been handed one of the most underrated gifts there is, because it makes staying a healthy weight feel almost automatic instead of like a daily war. Fast recovery. Two people can do the exact same workout, and one is fine the next day, while the other walks downstairs sideways for 3 days. Recovery speed has a real genetic element. It's influenced by how efficiently you repair muscle tissue, how well you manage inflammation, and how quickly your nervous system bounces back. People with fast recovery can train more often, train harder, and progress quicker, simply because they're ready to go again sooner. That compounds over years into a serious advantage. But fast recovery is also one of the most modifiable things on this whole list. Sleep, protein intake, stress levels, and how much you actually move on rest days all dramatically affect how fast you recover. So if you recover slowly, some of that is genetic, but a lot of it is just sleep and food you haven't fixed yet. Good natural posture and bone structure. Some people stand up straight without thinking about it, have naturally broad shoulders, a narrower waist, and a frame that just looks athletic before they've done anything at all. Bone structure is almost entirely genetic. Shoulder width, hip width, the length of your limbs, the size of your rib cage, none of it can be trained or changed. Someone with naturally wide clavicles and a narrow waist will look like they lift the moment they put on a small amount of muscle, because the underlying frame creates that V shape for free. Someone with a wider hip structure has to work much harder to create the same visual effect. This is one of the most unfair gifts on the list, because it's pure architecture you were handed at birth. But it's also worth remembering that frame is just the canvas. Plenty of people with average frames look incredible because they actually built something on top of it, and plenty of people with great frames waste them entirely. A resilient mind. The last one isn't physical, but it might be the most powerful gift here. Some people are genuinely more mentally resilient. By default, they handle stress better, they don't spiral as hard after a setback, they stay motivated through boring stretches, and they recover emotionally faster than other people. There's a real genetic component to traits like baseline mood, stress reactivity, and how your brain handles dopamine and motivation. If you've got a naturally steady, resilient mind, that quietly affects everything, because consistency in health and fitness is mostly a mental game, not a physical one. The person who keeps showing up beats the genetically gifted person who quits every time. But like almost everything else on this list, mental resilience is also trainable. It's not fixed. People build it through repeatedly doing hard things and surviving them. So if you weren't born with it, you can absolutely earn it, which honestly might make it the best gift of all, because it's the one nobody can keep you from getting. Hair and nails keep growing after you die. This one sounds creepy enough that most people just nod and accept it. It is also completely false. Once the heart stops, blood stops circulating, oxygen stops reaching tissues, and cell division stops with it. Hair and nails literally cannot grow without that supply. What actually happens after death is that the skin dehydrates and starts to shrink back. The skin around the nails retracts, the skin on the scalp and face pulls tight, and now the nails and hair look longer relative to the receding skin. The hair did not grow, the skin shrank. Same with the stubble that appears to come up on a corpse. The skin pulls back, the hair shafts that were sitting just under the surface are now slightly more exposed, and to someone looking at the face, it looks like the body has grown a tiny bit of facial hair overnight. Funeral directors have known this for decades. It just makes a better horror movie line to say the body kept growing after death. so the actual mechanism never really filtered through to the public. Humans have 5 senses. This one is so embedded that schools still teach it. Sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. Done. Except humans actually have a lot more than that, and pretending we only have 5 leads to people not understanding how their own body works. There is proprioception, which is the sense of where your limbs are in space without having to look at them. The reason you can touch your nose with your eyes closed. There is the vestibular sense, which is your balance and orientation, run by the inner ear, the reason you know when you are upside down or spinning. There is interoception, which is awareness of internal states like hunger, thirst, heart rate, bladder fullness, breathing rate. There is thermoception, which is temperature sensing on a separate pathway from regular touch. There is nociception, which is pain detection on its own dedicated system. The actual number of human senses depends on how strictly you define a sense, but most neuroscientists put it somewhere between 9 and 21. 5 is a leftover guess from ancient Greek philosophy that somehow survived the entire history of modern science and is still printed in school textbooks today. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Everyone has had a parent or grandparent yell at them for this. 1. They were wrong. The actual sound of a knuckle cracking is just gas bubbles forming or collapsing in the synovial fluid that lubricates the joint. No tissue is being damaged. No bone is being ground down. There was a doctor named Donald Unger who spent over 60 years cracking the knuckles on one hand every single day and deliberately leaving the other hand alone, just to test this claim. At the end of it, he compared both hands, no difference in arthritis rates between them. He won an IG Nobel Prize for the experiment. Bigger long-term studies have looked at habitual knuckle crackers versus people who never crack and found no increased rate of arthritis either. There may be a tiny association with slightly reduced grip strength in lifelong heavy crackers, but the arthritis thing is fiction. The popping sound is just gas. Crack away if you enjoy it. Sugar makes kids hyper. Hard to find a more universally believed claim that has been more thoroughly disproven. Sugar does not make children hyperactive. This has been tested in actual blinded studies, where parents were told their kids had been given sugar when they had actually been given a placebo, and the parents still reported their kids as being noticeably more hyperactive afterwards. The effect was entirely in the observer's head. The kids on placebo behaved exactly the same as the kids on real sugar. When children seem hyper after eating sugar, it is because they are usually also at a birthday party, surrounded by friends, games, cake, presents, parental excitement, and a stimulating environment. The sugar gets blamed because it is the most obvious target. The hyperactivity is from being a child at a party. Multiple meta-analyses going all the way back to the 1990s have confirmed there is no link between sugar consumption and short-term hyperactivity in children. The myth survives because parents want a clean villain to point at. The actual answer is that birthday parties are exciting. That is the entire mechanism. Shaving makes hair grow back thicker. This one is repeated everywhere because the regrowth genuinely does feel thicker, but the reason people assume is wrong. A hair shaft is naturally tapered, thinner, and softer at the tip, and slightly thicker at the base. When you shave, you cut the hair off at the surface of the skin, which means the soft tapered tip is gone, and you are left with a blunt, flat end exposed. That blunt end feels coarser when you touch it, and looks darker because it has not been weathered by sun or air yet. It is the exact same hair growing back at the exact same thickness. No biological process turns the act of shaving into a signal to the follicle to start producing thicker, denser, darker hair. Hair growth rate and thickness are determined by genetics, hormones, age, and nutrition, not by a razor. And while we are on the subject of things the average person has been told to believe without questioning, the diet industry has convinced most people that getting in shape requires eating sad, bland food for months on end. It really does not. That is exactly why I made the Bland is Banned cookbook. 102 recipes, high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and they actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, all of that. Normal meals built to help you stay leaner without hating your life. And if you want the whole structured package, Summer Shred is a 6-week program designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, and it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. Both are half off right now, so be quick while the launch sale is still on. First link in the description. You need 8 glasses of water a day. This number gets repeated as if it is written somewhere in a medical textbook. It is not. The 8x8 rule, 8 ounces 8 times a day, has no clear scientific origin anyone has ever been able to properly track down. The closest thing it can be traced to is a 1945 US Food and Nutrition Board recommendation that adults consume about 2.5 liters of water per day. That same recommendation explicitly stated that most of this amount is already contained in prepared food. That second part got dropped completely as the message traveled and the number became a rule. The actual water requirement varies massively based on body size, activity level, climate, diet, and how much water is already in the food you eat. Someone eating a lot of fruit, vegetables, soup, and rice is already getting a serious amount of water from food alone. The thirst mechanism is also surprisingly accurate in healthy adults. Drinking when thirsty and keeping your urine pale yellow is a far better guide than counting glasses. Drinking water way beyond thirst does not provide bonus benefits, and in extreme cases can actually be dangerous through a condition called hyponatremia, where blood sodium gets diluted to a level that can cause serious neurological problems. There is no magic in the number 8. It just sounds clean. The tongue has separate taste zones. You have probably seen the diagram. Sweet at the tip, salty and sour on the sides, bitter at the back. Every primary school taught it for decades. It is wrong, and the mistake is so old, it is almost charming. The tongue map originally came from a 1901 German paper by a scientist named Hannig that did report slight differences in taste sensitivity across regions of the tongue, but only slight. The data got significantly mistranslated and exaggerated when it was reproduced in English textbooks, and that distorted version is the one that ended up in every science class for the next century. The actual reality is that all taste buds, which are spread across the entire tongue surface, can detect all 5 basic tastes: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. There are tiny regional variations in sensitivity, but no zones. You can taste sweetness at the back of your tongue. You can taste bitterness at the tip. The diagram is just bad science that survived because it looks neat in a textbook. Photographic memory exists. The idea that some rare people can glance at a page once and recall every detail with perfect accuracy is appealing because it turns intelligence into a superpower. The problem is, the actual evidence for true photographic memory in adults is essentially non-existent. Researchers have looked for it for decades, and despite testing many people who genuinely believe they have it, nobody has ever been able to demonstrate it under properly controlled conditions. The closest related thing is eidetic memory, which shows up occasionally in children, where they can briefly hold a vivid mental image of something they just saw for a short window of time before it fades. Even that is not perfect recall, and it almost always disappears by adolescence. What people with apparently incredible memory actually have is highly trained associative recall techniques, like memory palaces and pattern systems, that let them encode and retrieve information far better than the average person. It is a skill, not a camera in the brain. The myth survives because films and TV shows keep portraying it as real, and it makes for a much better character trait than the truth, which is that the person just practiced really hard. We only use 10% of our brains. This one has fueled entire self-help industries, multiple Hollywood films, and a long stream of supplement marketing for over a century. Completely false. Brain imaging studies using fMRI and PET scans have shown over and over that across the course of a normal day, basically every region of the brain shows measurable activity. Different tasks light up different regions, but no part of the brain sits dormant waiting to be unlocked by the right supplement, the right meditation app, or the right life coach. Even during sleep, most of the brain remains active. From an energy standpoint, the idea makes no sense either. The brain consumes about 20% of the body's total energy, despite being only 2% of body weight. Evolution would not maintain that level of metabolic expense on tissue that was not being used. The myth probably came from a misquoted comment by William James about people not reaching their full potential, which got distorted at some point into a percentage claim about the brain itself. The supplement industry has never let go of it because it is the perfect setup for selling pills that promise to unlock the other 90%. Humans evolved from chimpanzees. Almost everyone gets this slightly wrong. Humans did not evolve from chimpanzees. Humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor that lived around 6 to 7 million years ago, and from that ancestor, 2 separate lineages diverged. One eventually became modern chimpanzees. The other eventually became modern humans. Chimps have been evolving for the exact same 6 to 7 million years that humans have. They are not a frozen earlier version of us. They are a parallel branch with their own evolutionary path. This matters because the misconception leads to questions like, why are there still chimps if we evolved from them? Which is built on a false premise. We did not evolve from them. We share an ancestor with them, the same way you share a grandparent with a cousin, without being descended from your cousin. The cousin is not your ancestor. They are a relative. Chimpanzees are evolutionary cousins, not ancestors. Anxiety. This is your nervous system stuck in threat mode when there is no actual threat. Your brain is essentially running a fire drill while you are just trying to send an email. Heart rate goes up, breathing gets shallow, cortisol gets dumped into your bloodstream. Adrenaline tightens up your muscles. Blood gets redirected away from your digestive system and pushed out to your limbs in case you need to fight or run. Which is great if there is actually a tiger nearby. Less great if you are just sitting in traffic. The real problem is what happens when this becomes becomes your baseline. Chronic anxiety means your body is constantly mildly poisoned by its own stress chemistry. Sleep gets fragmented because your nervous system never fully powers down. Digestion goes sideways, which is why anxious people often deal with reflux, bloating, IBS, and weird food sensitivities that did not exist before. Your immune system gets suppressed because cortisol tells it to stand down. And mentally, anxious thinking narrows your focus, makes you scan for problems, and convinces you that the worst case is also the most likely case, which it almost never is. The body designed for survival starts eating itself when there is nothing actually to survive. Boredom. This one gets dismissed as harmless or even seen as a productivity problem to solve. But boredom is actually one of the most important signals your brain produces. It means dopamine is low and your attention has nowhere meaningful to land. The trap is what people do with it. Instead of letting boredom do its job, which is to push you towards something engaging, meaningful or new, most people reach for the fastest dopamine they can find. Phone, scroll, snack, drink, another tab, another video, anything that smothers the discomfort without solving it. And the body actually pays for that long term. Constant low-grade stimulation desensitizes your dopamine system, which means everything else in your life starts feeling flatter. Real food tastes less interesting. Real conversation feels less rewarding. A walk outside feels boring. Your tolerance for boredom drops further, which makes the loop tighter. The original boredom was your brain asking for something better. Smothering it with junk content trains your brain to never get that something better. People underestimate how much of modern motivation and mood problems actually trace back to a dopamine system that has been hammered flat by years of avoiding boredom instead of using it. Anger. Quick burst of anger is actually one of the cleanest emotions in the body. Adrenaline spikes, heart rate jumps, blood pressure climbs. Your muscles get a sudden surge of fuel. It is designed to push you to act, defend yourself, or set a limit somewhere. Used briefly and resolved, anger can be useful. Standing up for yourself, walking away from something that is wrong for you, telling someone they have crossed a line. That is anger working as intended. What is destructive is sustained anger, resentment, grudges, daily rage at traffic, co-workers, news, the internet, your own life. Your body cannot tell the difference between a real threat and you mentally relitigating a fight from 3 weeks ago. Each time you ruminate, you spike your stress chemistry again. Chronic anger pushes blood pressure up. It thickens the blood. It accelerates plaque buildup in the arteries. Decades of research have linked sustained hostility to higher rates of heart disease, stroke, and early death. Anger is not the problem. Anger that never leaves the body is the problem. The expression of it matters less than whether you actually let it process and move on. Hold on to it long enough, and the body you are punishing is your own. Joy. Genuine joy, the not performing for Instagram kind, actually does measurable good things to the body. Dopamine and serotonin both rise. Cortisol drops. Inflammation markers go down. Blood pressure tends to ease. Immune function improves. People in genuinely joyful states recover from illness faster, sleep better, have better digestion, and tend to live longer. Joy is not a vibe. It is a physiological state with real downstream benefits. The catch is that joy is something most adults have unconsciously trained themselves out of. We label it as childish, or cringe, or naive. We mock it in others and squash it in ourselves. We confuse joy with stimulation and chase the second thing instead, which is why people end up drinking and partying and shopping and scrolling and still feeling empty. Real joy tends to come from small, present, unimpressive moments. A good meal you actually paid attention to. A conversation where you forgot the time. A walk where you notice the sky. The kind of stuff that does not photograph well. People who routinely access these small joys tend to be the healthiest, longest-lasting people around. Not because joy is some magical health hack, but because the absence of joy is one of the slowest forms of damage there is. Loneliness. Loneliness is not just a sad feeling. It is recognized by researchers as a legitimate physical health risk on the level of smoking. Chronically lonely people have higher rates of heart disease, dementia, stroke, depression, and early death. The body interprets prolonged isolation as a threat state because for most of human history, being alone meant being in danger. So cortisol stays elevated, inflammation goes up, sleep gets worse, immunity drops, the brain itself shrinks slightly in regions related to memory and social processing when people are isolated for long enough. And what makes this one tricky is that you can be lonely while surrounded by people. Lonely in a marriage, lonely in a city, lonely on group chats. The thing the body wants is not contact in general, but actual felt connection, the kind where you feel seen and not having to perform. That is what regulates the nervous system. Texting people does almost nothing for this. Scrolling does even less. Loneliness is one of the few emotional states that pretty much demands an in-person, in real-life solution. And most people try to fix it with the exact thing that made it worse in the first place, which is more screen time. Then they wonder why nothing improves. And if you actually want to do something about how you feel day to day, the food side of this is way bigger than people realize. Summer Shred is the 6-week program I built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of my cookbook, Bland is Banned. Bland is Banned itself is 102 high-protein recipes I made to actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, pasta, desserts. All the stuff people assume they have to give up when they want to lean out. Real food you actually enjoy while you get leaner. Both are half price right now for launch, so be quick if you want them while the sale is still on. First link in the description. There is also a free meal plan down there too, if you just want a starting point. Shame. This one is in a different category from guilt, even though people use the words interchangeably. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. Massive difference. Guilt is actually useful because it points out a behavior you can correct. Shame just stares at you and tells you the problem is your existence, which means there is nothing to fix and nowhere to go. So people stay stuck. Physically, shame is one of the most paralyzing emotional states. It causes a kind of internal freeze. Heart rate can drop. Shoulders curl inward. Eye contact gets harder. People literally feel smaller. The longer it sits, the more it bleeds into everything else. Shame is one of the biggest drivers of binge eating, hidden drinking, doom scrolling, avoidance behavior, and self-sabotage. Because if you already believe you are broken, the logic of taking care of yourself stops making sense. Why bother eating well, training, sleeping, building anything, if the verdict has already been handed down? Shame does not motivate anyone to fix themselves long term. It just keeps them quiet and stuck while the underlying problem grows. The healthier replacement is guilt, that points at behavior without taking out your identity along with it. Stress. Stress in short bursts is genuinely helpful. A workout is stress. A hard conversation is stress. A deadline is stress. The body adapts and gets stronger because of it. The issue is chronic stress, the kind that never gets a recovery window. Cortisol stays elevated. Blood sugar runs higher than it should. Blood pressure stays up. Sleep gets compromised. Muscle gets harder to build. Fat gets easier to store, especially around the midsection. Inflammation rises across the whole body. The brain takes a hit too. The hippocampus, the part responsible for memory and learning, actually shrinks under chronic stress. The amygdala, the part responsible for threat detection, grows, which means you literally become a worse learner and a more reactive person the longer this state continues. Stress is not the enemy. Recovery being absent is the enemy. People talk about managing stress like the goal is to remove it. The goal is to build enough recovery into your life that the stress you do have actually makes you stronger instead of slowly grinding you down. Sleep, food, movement, sunlight, in-person connection, time away from screens. None of these are exciting. All of them are the actual solution. The problem is, they do not sell as well as a magnesium powder with a wellness influencer on the label. Apathy. This is the mood nobody talks about because it does not really feel like a mood. It feels like nothing. And that is exactly the problem. Apathy is the emotional equivalent of a flat battery. Nothing excites you, nothing scares you, nothing motivates you. Nothing matters that much. You go through the days fine, you are not depressed exactly, you are just not really there. Apathy is usually a sign of one of three things. Burnout, where the system has been pushed too hard for too long and shut down to protect itself. Chronic dopamine flattening, often from years of overconsumption of fast stimulation. Or unresolved low-grade depression that learned to hide behind functionality. The body in this state is often inflamed, under-rested, under-moved, and overstimulated by screens. The brain stops releasing the chemicals that make things feel meaningful because it has been getting them artificially for too long, or because survival is taking all its resources. Apathy is dangerous because it does not hurt enough to motivate change. People can stay in it for years. It only starts looking like a problem when something good happens, and you notice you cannot actually feel it. Envy. Envy is one of the most useful emotions if you are honest with yourself, and one of the most poisonous if you are not. The signal underneath envy is genuinely informative. It tells you what you actually want. The person you envy is essentially pointing at the thing you wish you had, whether that is a body, a career, a relationship, a level of freedom, or just a kind of peace you do not have yet. That information has real value. The destructive part is when envy curdles into resentment. Now, instead of using the signal, you start hoping they fail. You start subtly tearing them down in your own head, or out loud. You start making their success mean something about your own inadequacy. That state is physically nasty. It is essentially low-grade chronic stress, with a side of self-loathing. Cortisol stays up, Sleep gets worse, mood drops, motivation drops, and the wildest part is the person you envy does not feel any of it. The damage is entirely yours. Envy that you process honestly is a compass. Envy you let fester is a slow poison you keep drinking, and then blame on the other person. Excitement. This is the high arousal positive state. Dopamine, adrenaline, and norepinephrine all rise together. Pulse picks up, pupils dilate slightly. You feel ready, energized, switched on. In short doses, this is one of the most useful emotional states there is. It powers performance, it powers learning, it powers connection. People do their best work and have their best memories inside excitement states. The trap is when excitement becomes the only emotional register you can tolerate. People who are chronically chasing excitement, gambling, extreme content, constant novelty, new partners, new purchases, new trips, eventually wear out the same dopamine system that anxiety and boredom wreck. They lose the ability to enjoy normal life because their nervous system has been calibrated to expect a peak every day. That is when excitement becomes a problem. The trick is to actually feel it when it shows up, instead of immediately reaching for your phone to capture it or share it. Half of modern excitement gets killed before it lands, because the moment something good happens, people go straight into broadcasting mode instead of experiencing mode. Excitement felt fully is healthy. Excitement performed for an audience is just stress dressed up to look fun. Sadness. Sadness gets treated like it is broken or wrong and needs to be fixed immediately, which is exactly why it tends to get stuck for so long in modern life. Sadness in its normal function is just the body processing loss. Loss of a person, loss of a possibility, loss of a version of yourself, loss of a hope you had. It produces tears, lower energy, a need for stillness, a need for connection. It is supposed to come, do its job, and pass. What ruins it is forcing yourself out of it before it has finished. Distraction, numbing, pretending you are fine, burying it under work, food, alcohol, scrolling, anything. Buried sadness does not actually go away. It just changes form. It becomes apathy, it becomes irritability. It becomes random crying in the car for no reason 8 months later. Sadness that gets to move through the body cleanly tends to leave the body cleanly. It is uncomfortable but not damaging. Sadness that gets locked down is the one that turns into something heavier. The healthiest response to sadness is usually the unglamorous one. Slow down, talk to someone, let it be there, let it do what it came to do. Then it can actually leave. Hope. This is the one most people underestimate. Because hope sounds soft and naive, and we live in a culture that respects cynicism way more than it respects belief. But hope is a measurable physical state in the body. Hopeful people have lower cortisol, better immune function, faster healing rates, and longer life expectancy on average than hopeless people in the same circumstances. That is not motivational poster talk. That is actual research on cardiac patients, cancer patients, and chronic illness recovery. Hope is what makes consistency possible. It is hard to eat well, train, sleep properly, build anything, or get through hard times without some basic belief that the effort is going to matter. Hopelessness is what makes people quit before they have given anything a real chance. The body knows the difference. A body running on hope releases different chemistry than a body running on resignation. You do not need to feel certain. You do not need to feel positive every day. You just need to leave room for the possibility that this could actually get better. Most people who eventually got healthier, leaner, stronger, calmer, or happier did not start by feeling those things. They started by hoping those things were possible for them. Then they did the work long enough for the hope to be proven right. Tribulus terrestris. Let's start here because this is probably the most famous testosterone booster on earth, and it does almost nothing. Tribulus is in basically every test booster on the shelf. It has a spiky little plant on the label. It sounds ancient and powerful, and when you actually look at the research, grown men taking it just do not see their testosterone go up. There are studies on athletes, studies on older men, studies on guys with low test, and the needle barely moves. The one place Tribulus shows any consistent effect is libido, and even that is mild and inconsistent. So if your goal is feeling a bit friskier, fine, maybe. If your goal is actually raising the hormone, this is a plant pretending to be a steroid. It goes nowhere near the list of things that work. And I know what some of you are thinking, but it made me feel different. Yeah, a lot of things make you feel different. A good night of sleep makes you feel different. Feeling different is not the same as your blood test changing. And the blood test is the only judge that counts here. D-aspartic acid. This one is interesting because it actually had a moment. There was one early study where D-aspartic acid raised testosterone in men over about 12 days, and the supplement industry lost its mind. Every booster on the planet suddenly had DAA in it. But here is the thing. When better studies came along, especially in men who already train, the effect mostly vanished. One follow-up study even found it slightly lowered testosterone at higher doses, which is the exact opposite of the entire point. So DAA is not a scam exactly. It is more like a lottery ticket that won once and got framed on the wall while everyone ignored the 1,000 losing tickets. It does not make the list. Now, before you get depressed and close the video, I want to be clear about something. There are things that work. They are just not the things with the cool names and the angry-looking men on the packaging. The stuff that actually works is almost insultingly boring. So let's get into the boring stuff, because the boring stuff is where the results live. Sleep. I know. You wanted a pill, and I gave you a bedtime. But this genuinely belongs at the top, because sleep is not a booster in a small supportive way. It is the main event. Your body does most of its testosterone production while you sleep, particularly during deep sleep and REM. There is a well-known study where healthy young men were cut down to about 5 hours of sleep for 1 week, and their daytime testosterone dropped by 10 to 15%. 1 week. That is not a tiny dip. That is the difference between feeling like yourself and feeling like a slightly worse, foggier, less motivated version of yourself. And you did it to yourself by staying up watching one more episode. So if you are sleeping 5 or 6 hours, chasing a supplement is genuinely a bit funny. You are trying to top up a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. Fix the hole first. Get 7 to 9 hours, keep it consistent, and you will likely do more for your testosterone in 2 weeks than any Tribulus capsule will do in 2 years. It costs nothing. That is exactly why nobody markets it to you. Body fat. Here is one nobody likes hearing, so I will say it kindly, but I will still say it. Carrying a lot of excess body fat actively lowers your testosterone. Fat tissue contains an enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. So the more excess fat you carry, the more of your own testosterone gets quietly converted into something else. It becomes a bit of a loop too. Low testosterone makes it harder to build muscle and easier to store fat, and more fat lowers testosterone. Further, not a fun loop to be stuck in. But here is the good news, and it is genuinely good news. The loop runs both ways. When men carrying real excess weight lose a meaningful chunk of it, their testosterone goes up, sometimes by a lot. You are not boosting anything. You are just removing the thing that was suppressing you. So if you are significantly overweight, losing fat is not a side quest. Before the testosterone work begins, losing fat is the testosterone work. And if eating in a way that strips fat off without making your meals miserable sounds appealing, that is basically the entire reason Bland is Banned exists. It is a cookbook full of high-protein, lower-calorie food that actually tastes like food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, all the stuff you assume you have to give up to get lean. It is half price right now, first link in the description. Getting leaner and getting your hormones working better are the same project, so you may as well make the food part enjoyable. Resistance training. Lifting weights raises testosterone. Not in a permanent, dramatic walk-around juiced way, but there is a real acute spike after a hard session. And more importantly, training consistently supports healthy hormone levels long-term. The trick is doing it in a way that actually works, instead of a way that backfires. Big compound lifts are your friend here. Squats, deadlifts, presses, rows, pull-ups, movements that use a lot of muscle at once create a bigger hormonal response than sitting on a machine doing tiny isolation work for your rear delts. That does not mean isolation work is useless. It just means the meat of your program should be the heavy multi-joint stuff. Train hard, train with real effort, get close to failure on your working sets. But, and this is the part people skip, do not turn every session into a 2-hour death march. Which brings me to the thing that quietly ruins this for a lot of guys. Overtraining. This is the trap for the motivated ones. Some of you are not lazy, you are the opposite. And that is the problem. You read that training raises testosterone, so you decide more must be better. You train 6 days a week for 90 minutes, you do not deload, you do not rest, and you wonder why you feel flat, weak, unmotivated, and a bit miserable. That is not low testosterone caused by bad genetics. That is low testosterone caused by you. Chronic overtraining without enough recovery raises cortisol, your stress hormone, and elevated cortisol over time suppresses testosterone. So training is medicine, but like any medicine, the dose matters. Train hard, then actually let your body recover. Rest days are not weakness. Rest days are when the results you train for actually get built. Vitamin D. Now we get to the first actual supplement on the list that earns its place. And even this one comes with a giant asterisk. Vitamin D behaves more like a hormone in the body than a vitamin. And men who are genuinely deficient in it tend to have lower testosterone. When those deficient men get their levels back to normal, testosterone often improves. So vitamin D works. But, and this is critical, it only works if you are actually deficient. If your vitamin D is already fine and you take more, your testosterone does not climb higher. You do not get bonus points for stacking it. The honest move here is simple. Get your vitamin D level checked. If you are low, which a lot of people who live somewhere gray and spend all day indoors genuinely are, fixing it is a real evidence-based win. If you are not low, save your money. That is the difference between a real booster and a marketing booster. A real one fixes a deficiency, a marketing one promises to push a healthy man into superhuman territory, which is not a thing capsules do. Zinc and magnesium. Same story, slightly different minerals. Zinc is directly involved in testosterone production, and magnesium plays a role too. Men who are deficient in zinc can see testosterone drop, and correcting that deficiency brings it back up. You may have seen these two sold together as ZMA, usually with a promise that it will transform your physique in your sleep. The reality is calmer than the label. If you are deficient in zinc or magnesium, fixing that helps. If you already get enough from your food, taking more does basically nothing for your testosterone. Are you noticing the pattern yet? Because it is the whole video really. Sleep, body fat, training, vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, every single thing on this list works by removing something that was holding you down. None of it works by adding magic. Your body already knows how to make testosterone. It has been doing it without your help your entire life. The job is not to flog it into producing more. The job is to stop sabotaging it. Stress and cortisol, worth its own section because it is the most underrated one. Cortisol and testosterone have a tense relationship. When cortisol is chronically elevated, testosterone tends to sit lower, and chronic stress is everywhere now. Work stress, money stress, no sleep, scrolling your phone in bed until your brain forgets what calm feels like. You cannot supplement your way out of a life that keeps your stress dial to maximum. There is no capsule strong enough to outmuscle that. Sleep helps, training helps, as long as you are not overdoing it. Getting outside helps. Not living permanently glued to a screen helps. It is not glamorous advice, but the unglamorous advice is the advice that works. And at this point in the video, you have probably accepted that. Alcohol. Quick one, but it matters. Heavy, regular drinking lowers testosterone. A drink here and there is not the issue. The issue is the guy who is doing everything else right, training hard, eating well, then drinking heavily every weekend, and wondering why progress stalled. You do not need to become a monk. You just need to be honest about whether a couple of drinks is actually a couple of drinks. Cutting back is not a booster you buy. It is a suppressor you remove. Same idea as everything else here. The actual testosterone boosters that work. So let's bring it home. After all of that, here is your real list. The one that would survive an actual blood test. Sleep 7 to 9 hours consistently. Get your body fat down into a healthy range. Lift weights properly, with compound movements and real effort. Do not overtrain. Recover like it matters. Fix a vitamin D deficiency, if you actually have one. Fix a zinc or magnesium deficiency, if you actually have one. Keep your chronic stress under control. Do not drink heavily. That is the whole list. That is every testosterone booster that actually works. And notice what is not on it. No Tribulus. No DAA. No proprietary blend with a name that sounds like a weapon system. Because here is the thing the supplement industry really does not want you to sit with. The stuff that genuinely works is mostly free. It is mostly boring, and it cannot be bottled and sold to you at a markup. A capsule cannot be patented as sleep. Nobody can corner the market on lose some body fat, so that stuff gets no marketing budget. And the spiky plant in the angry packaging gets all of it. The effort got hidden behind the products, basically. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. You probably do not have a testosterone problem that needs a product. You more likely have a sleep problem, or a body fat problem, or a stress problem, or a training like a maniac with no rest days problem, wearing a testosterone costume. Fix the boring stuff first. Fix it for a couple of months and actually mean it. Most of you will feel like a completely different person, and you will not have spent a penny on a plant that does nothing. Sort the basics, and your body will handle the rest. It always knew how. It was just waiting for you to stop getting in the way. Whey protein. This is the gold standard for a reason, and not because of marketing. Whey is what you get when you separate the liquid part of milk during cheese making, and the reason it works so well for muscle is the amino acid profile. It is incredibly high in leucine, which is the amino acid your body actually uses to flip the switch on muscle protein synthesis. So when people say whey hits fast and triggers growth, that is not gym bro talk. That is literally what is happening. It gets digested quickly, spikes amino acids in your blood within about 30 minutes, and your muscles use that surge to start repairing and building. There are three main types, and people massively overthink this. Whey concentrate is the cheapest, sits around 70 to 80% protein, and has small amounts of lactose and fat in it. For most people, this is completely fine, and probably what you should be buying. Whey isolate is filtered further, sits around 90% protein, and has almost no lactose. So if dairy makes your stomach do gymnastics, isolate is the move. Whey hydrolysate is pre-digested, absorbs even faster, costs the most, and gives you basically no extra benefit unless you are an actual professional athlete, timing things down to the minute. You are not. Just get concentrate or isolate. Casein protein. This is the other protein in milk, and it behaves like the complete opposite of whey. Where whey hits fast and leaves fast, casein forms a kind of gel in your stomach when it meets stomach acid, and that gel slowly releases amino acids over 6 to 8 hours. So instead of a quick spike, you get a long, slow drip feed. That is why people take it before bed. You are about to go 7 or 8 hours without eating, and casein keeps amino acids in your bloodstream the whole time, which keeps your body in a building state instead of a breaking down state. Now, do you actually need a casein shake before bed to grow muscle? No. If you ate a decent dinner with protein in it, you are already getting a slow release, because real food digests slowly anyway. Casein only really matters if your last meal of the day was light on protein, or you genuinely cannot eat much in the evening. For everyone else, it is a nice to have, not a must have. Cottage cheese and Greek yogurt are also high in casein if you want it from food instead of powder. Egg protein. Eggs were considered the perfect protein for a long time before whey took over the conversation. And honestly, they still hold up. The protein in eggs has one of the highest biological values of any food on the planet, which is just a fancy way of saying your body can actually use almost all of it. 2 whole eggs give you around 12 grams of protein with a complete amino acid profile and a solid amount of leucine. So if you eat 4 eggs in the morning, you are already at 24 grams of protein before you have done anything else. The yolk is where most of the nutrients live, which is why people who throw away yolks are making one of the dumbest decisions in fitness. You are throwing away vitamin D, choline, healthy fats, and roughly half the protein of the egg. Egg white protein powder exists for people who want pure protein without the calories of yolks, and it works fine, but whole eggs as a food are basically unbeatable for muscle building because of how complete and absorbable the protein is. And while we are on the subject of muscle, none of this matters if your overall diet is a mess. You can have the perfect protein source and still get nowhere because the rest of your meals are sabotaging you. That is exactly why I made Bland is Banned, which is 102 high-protein recipes that actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts. All of it built around hitting your protein without eating sad diet meals. And if you want the full package, Summer Shred is a 6-week personalized program made specifically for you that gets you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. Both are half price right now. First link in the description. Beef protein. Beef protein powder is one of those things that sounds cool on paper, but is usually not what people think it is. Most beef protein on the market is not made from steak. It is made from hydrolyzed beef byproducts, gelatin, and connective tissue, which gives you protein on paper, but a much weaker amino acid profile than whey or eggs. The leucine content is usually lower, and gelatin-based protein is famously poor at triggering muscle protein synthesis on its own. Now, eating actual beef is a completely different conversation. Real beef is one of the best muscle-building foods on earth. It gives you a complete protein, plenty of leucine, creatine, iron, zinc, and B12, all of which support recovery, strength, and the actual machinery your muscles use to grow. A 6-ounce steak gives you around 40 grams of high-quality protein. So if someone tells you they are taking beef protein to grow, the honest answer is just to eat the beef instead. Soy protein. Soy is the most controversial protein on this list, and most of the controversy is overblown gym myth. The bro science panic about soy turning men into something else is not backed by serious research, especially at normal intakes. Soy is a complete plant protein, contains all the essential amino acids, and is one of the few plant proteins with a decent leucine content. Studies comparing soy to whey for muscle building show whey wins, but not by as much as people pretend. Soy still builds muscle. It is just slightly less efficient. The bigger issue with soy is the form it comes in. Whole edamame, tempeh, and tofu are genuinely solid protein sources. Highly processed soy protein isolate added to ultra-processed foods is a different story, not because the protein is bad, but because the food it lives in is usually trash. If you are vegetarian or vegan, soy is one of the most useful proteins available to you. If you are eating meat regularly, you do not really need it. Pea protein. Pea protein has quietly become the best plant-based option in the last few years, and for good reason. It is high in leucine compared to most plant proteins, easy to digest, allergen-friendly. and absorbs reasonably well. The one weakness is that it is low in methionine, which is one of the essential amino acids. So if pea protein is your only protein source, you want to pair it with something that fills that gap, like rice protein or whole grains throughout the day. This is why a lot of the better vegan protein powders are pea and rice combined. Pea is low in methionine, rice is low in lysine, and together they form a complete amino acid profile that gets close to whey for muscle building purposes. The texture of pea protein is grittier than whey, and the taste takes some getting used to, but if you are dairy-free or plant-based, this is the one to reach for. Rice protein. Rice protein on its own is decent but incomplete. It is low in lysine, which means using it as your only protein source is not going to do much for muscle. The reason rice protein gets included anywhere serious is when it is paired with pea protein, where the two together actually cover all the essential amino acids properly. As a solo protein, it is more useful for general dietary protein than for muscle building specifically. The other thing worth knowing is that rice protein has a smoother texture than pea, which is why some companies blend the two not just for amino acids, but for taste and mouthfeel. If you see a vegan protein powder with rice and pea as the two main ingredients, that is the company doing it right. If you see a rice-only protein, it is probably cheaper, but not your best option. Hemp protein. Hemp protein is one of those products that looks healthy because of the branding around it, but is actually pretty weak for muscle building. The protein content per scoop is much lower than whey or pea, often only 10 to 15 grams compared to 25. It also has a chalky, earthy taste a lot of people struggle with. The upside is that hemp protein comes with fiber, healthy fats, and minerals, so it works more like a whole food powder than a pure protein source. For someone who is already getting plenty of protein from food and just wants an extra nutrient-dense addition to a smoothie, hemp is fine. For someone trying to actually build muscle and hit a protein target, hemp is not efficient. You would have to take 2 or 3 scoops to match what 1 scoop of whey gives you, and at that point, the calories and the cost stop making sense. Collagen protein. Collagen has had a massive marketing moment in the last few years, and most of what people believe about it is wrong. Collagen is technically protein, but it is an incomplete protein missing tryptophan, and it is very low in leucine. So for muscle building purposes, collagen is one of the least useful proteins you can take. If you're using collagen as your post-workout shake thinking it is going to grow your arms, you are basically taking flavored gelatin, where collagen actually does have some evidence is for joint health, skin elasticity, and connective tissue recovery, especially when paired with vitamin C. There are studies showing collagen peptides may help with tendon and ligament repair in athletes, which is genuinely useful if you train hard. So collagen has a place, just not as a muscle building protein. Treat it like a supplement for joints and skin, not a replacement for whey. Insect protein. This one feels weird to talk about, but it is becoming more common, so it is worth covering. Cricket protein and other insect-based powders actually have a surprisingly strong amino acid profile, are environmentally efficient to produce, and contain a complete set of essential amino acids. The protein quality is comparable to beef in some studies, and the leucine content is decent. The problem is mostly cultural. Most people are not going to scoop cricket powder into their oats, no matter how good the macros look. It also tends to be more expensive than whey, harder to find, and has a stronger taste that bakes weirdly into shakes. If the supply chain ever scales up and prices come down, this could become a real option. Right now, it is more of a novelty than something you should plan your protein intake around. Mixed protein blends. A lot of protein powders on the market now are not just one source. They blend whey, casein, egg, and sometimes soy together to give you both a fast release from whey and a slow release from casein in one shake. The idea makes sense on paper. You get the quick spike for muscle protein synthesis and the slow drip for sustained amino acids. Whether you actually need this is another question. For most people, eating a meal a few hours later does the exact same thing as a blend. Where blends are genuinely useful is the last meal of the day. A blend before bed gives you a fast initial spike and then a slow release through the night, which is harder to replicate with one type alone. If you only have one protein powder in your house and you want it to cover every situation reasonably well, a whey casein blend is the most versatile option. Whole food protein. Last one, and this is the one nobody wants to hear, the best protein for building muscle is not a powder. It is real food, chicken breast, lean beef, eggs, fish, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, milk, tofu, lentils, when combined properly. Whole food protein comes with the full amino acid profile, plus everything else your body needs to actually use that protein, like B vitamins, iron, zinc, healthy fats, and fiber. Protein powder is a supplement. The word literally means it supplements a diet that is already mostly built around real food. If you are hitting 150 grams of protein a day and one shake helps you get there, great. If your entire protein intake is 3 shakes a day and a granola bar, no amount of optimizing your powder choice is going to fix that. The hierarchy is real food first, powder second. Get that order wrong, and the rest of this conversation does not matter. Diabetes. This is the one almost everyone has heard of and almost nobody actually understands. At its core, diabetes is a problem with how your body handles blood sugar. Normally you eat, your blood sugar rises, and your pancreas releases insulin, which is basically the key that lets sugar move out of your blood and into your cells, where it gets used for energy. In diabetes, that system breaks down. With type 1, the immune system attacks the cells that make insulin, so the body just stops producing it. That one is not lifestyle related and usually shows up early in life. Type 2 is the far more common version, and it works differently. Your cells slowly stop responding to insulin properly, so the pancreas pumps out more and more, trying to get the message across, until it eventually can't keep up. And the reason type 2 is such a big deal is that high blood sugar quietly damages everything over time. The blood vessels, the nerves, the kidneys, the eyes, the heart. People think of it as just a sugar problem, but it is really a slow, full-body wear and tear problem. The good news is that type 2 is heavily influenced by body composition, food quality, and movement, which means it is one of the most preventable and even reversible conditions on this whole list. Asthma. Asthma is a condition of the airways, the tubes that carry air in and out of your lungs. In someone with asthma, those airways are basically more sensitive and more reactive than they should be. When they get triggered by something, and that something could be cold air, exercise, dust, pollen, smoke, or even stress, the airways tighten up, the lining swells, and they start producing extra mucus. So now you have got a narrower tube, an inflamed tube, and a tube clogged with mucus all at once, which is why an asthma attack feels like trying to breathe through a straw. The chest gets tight, you wheeze, you cough, and breathing stops being something you do without thinking, and becomes the only thing you can think about. It is not something you outgrow the way people assume, although symptoms can definitely calm down or flare up across a lifetime. It is managed rather than cured, usually with 2 types of inhaler, one that calms things down day to day, and one that opens the airways fast when an attack hits. Hypertension. Hypertension is just a medical word for high blood pressure, and it is probably the sneakiest thing on this entire list. Blood pressure is the force your blood pushes against the walls of your arteries as your heart pumps it around. A bit of pressure is obviously necessary. That is how blood moves. But when that pressure stays too high for too long, it is like running a hose at full blast all day every day. The pipes were not built for that. Over years, the constant strain stiffens and damages your arteries, forces your heart to work harder until it actually thickens and struggles, and quietly raises your risk of stroke, heart attack, and kidney damage. And here is the genuinely scary part. It usually has no symptoms at all. You do not feel high blood pressure. You can walk around for a decade with it doing damage, and have no idea, which is exactly why it gets called the silent killer. The only way to know is to actually measure it. It is heavily tied to body weight, salt intake, alcohol, stress, and how much you move, which means like type 2 diabetes, a lot of it sits within your control. Heart disease. Heart disease is a broad term, but when most people say it, they are talking about coronary artery disease, which is the big one. Your heart is a muscle, and like any muscle, it needs its own blood supply to keep working. That supply comes through the coronary arteries. Over time, a sticky mix of cholesterol, fat, and other junk can build up along the walls of those arteries, forming plaque. As the plaque grows, the artery narrows and less blood gets through to the heart muscle. That is why some people feel chest pain or pressure when they exert themselves, because the heart is asking for more blood than the narrowed pipe can deliver. The real danger is when a plaque ruptures and a clot forms on top of it, suddenly blocking the artery completely. That is a heart attack, and that section of heart muscle starts dying because it is cut off from oxygen. Heart disease is still one of the leading causes of death in the world, and it builds up silently over decades. It is driven by blood pressure, cholesterol, smoking, blood sugar, body composition, and stress. So it is genuinely a story written by everyday habits long before it becomes an emergency. Cancer. Cancer is not really one disease. It is a whole category. And that is the first thing worth understanding. Your body is constantly making new cells to replace old ones, and normally those cells follow strict rules about when to grow, when to stop, and when to die off. Cancer is what happens when a cell's instruction manual gets damaged and it stops following those rules. It keeps dividing when it should stop, it ignores the signals telling it to die, and it builds up into a mass of cells that serves no purpose and takes up space and resources. Some cancers stay put. The dangerous ones spread, sending cells off to set up new colonies in other parts of the body, which is what makes it so hard to treat once it gets going. What causes that original damage varies enormously. Some of it is genetics and plain bad luck. Some of it is age, since the longer you live, the more chances there are for an error to slip through. But a meaningful chunk is linked to things like smoking, heavy alcohol, certain infections, sun exposure, and yes, long-term diet and body composition. It is not a moral failing, and a healthy life does not make you immune. But the risk is not entirely random either. A lot of what is on this list comes back to the same root things: your body composition, the quality of the food you eat, how much you move. And this is the part where most people quietly check out because they assume eating for their health means a future of dry chicken and sad steamed vegetables. It does not. That is exactly why I made the Bland is Banned cookbook. It is built around high-protein, lower-calorie food that actually tastes like food you want to eat. Burgers, wraps, loaded fries, pizzas, desserts, the kind of stuff people assume they have to give up to get in shape. And it is now half price. If you want a bit more structure than just recipes, there is also Summer Shred, which is a 6-week program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. Both links are in the description. Now back to it. Depression. Depression gets misunderstood constantly because the word is also used casually to mean sad. And clinical depression is not just sadness. Sadness is a normal emotion that comes and goes with events. Depression is more like a persistent low fog that settles over everything for weeks or months and does not lift just because something good happens. It is not only about mood either. It affects sleep, appetite, energy, concentration, and motivation. One of the cruelest parts is that it drains the desire to do the exact things that would help, like getting up, eating properly, seeing people, or moving your body. So it becomes self-reinforcing. It is not a character weakness, and it is not something a person can just decide to snap out of, which is the worst possible advice you can give someone. It involves a real mix of brain chemistry, genetics, life circumstances, and physical health. And it is treatable, usually through a combination of therapy, sometimes medication, and lifestyle factors. Sleep, sunlight, movement, and nutrition do not cure it on their own, but they are not nothing either, and they genuinely matter as part of the bigger picture. Anxiety disorder. Everyone feels anxious sometimes, and that is completely normal. Anxiety is your body's threat detection system, the thing that makes your heart race before a job interview, or sharpens you up before something stressful. The problem with an anxiety disorder is that this system gets stuck in the on position. It starts firing when there is no real threat, or it fires far harder and far longer than the situation actually calls for. So you get the racing heart, the tight chest, the spinning thoughts, the restlessness, the constant low-level sense that something is wrong, except there is no tiger to run from. It is just there, humming away in the background, making ordinary life feel exhausting. It comes in different shapes, from generalized worry about everything, to panic attacks that hit like a physical wave, to specific intense fears. And it is closely tangled up with depression, which is why people often experience both. Like depression, it is genuinely treatable, and it responds well to therapy in particular. Things like caffeine, alcohol, poor sleep, and blood sugar swings can all crank it up. So the everyday physical stuff can quietly make a real difference. Epilepsy. Epilepsy is a condition of the brain. And to understand it, you have to remember that your brain runs on electricity. Your brain cells constantly send tiny, organized electrical signals to communicate, and normally that activity is controlled and coordinated. A seizure is what happens when a group of brain cells suddenly fires in a chaotic, synchronized burst, like an electrical storm breaking out. Epilepsy is when a person has a tendency to have these seizures repeatedly. And here is something most people get wrong, because films and TV only ever show one type. A seizure does not always mean someone collapsing and convulsing on the floor. Depending on where in the brain the storm happens and how far it spreads, a seizure can be a few seconds of someone going blank and unresponsive, a strange repetitive movement, an odd sensation, or yes, a full body convulsion. The causes range from genetics, to brain injury, to infections, to stroke, and in a lot of cases no clear cause is ever found. It is usually well managed with medication that calms down that overexcitable electrical activity, and many people with epilepsy live completely normal lives. Arthritis. Arthritis just means inflammation of the joints, and like cancer, it is really an umbrella term, covering different conditions. The two big ones are worth separating, because people lump them together and they are genuinely not the same. Osteoarthritis is the wear and tear version, and it is the most common. Your joints have a layer of smooth cartilage that lets the bones glide over each other painlessly. Over time, through use, age, injury, and load, that cartilage can wear down until you start getting bone rubbing closer to bone, which brings pain, stiffness, and swelling. It tends to hit the knees, hips, hands, and spine. Rheumatoid arthritis is a completely different animal. It is an autoimmune condition, meaning the immune system mistakenly attacks the lining of the joints as if it were a threat, causing inflammation, pain, and over time joint damage and deformity. That one is not about wear and tear, and it can show up at any age. Both are managed rather than cured, but staying active, keeping a healthy body weight to reduce load on the joints, and proper treatment all make a real difference to how much it limits your life. Stroke. A stroke is essentially a brain attack, and the comparison to a heart attack is genuinely useful. Just like the heart, your brain needs a constant supply of oxygen-rich blood, and it is extremely demanding, so it does not tolerate being cut off for long. A stroke happens when the blood supply to part of the brain is suddenly interrupted, and brain cells in that area start dying within minutes. There are two main types. The most common is when a clot blocks an artery feeding the brain. The other is when a blood vessel in the brain bursts and bleeds. Either way, a part of the brain loses its supply, and whatever that part controlled, whether it is speech, movement, vision, or memory, gets affected. This is why strokes can leave lasting effects. With a stroke, time is brain. Every minute of delay means more cells lost, which is why recognizing it fast genuinely matters. The classic signs are a sudden droop on one side of the face, weakness in one arm, and slurred or confused speech. And here's the connection to everything else on this list. The big risk factors for stroke are high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, smoking, and high cholesterol. The same usual suspects show up again and again. Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia, and dementia is the broader term for a serious decline in memory and thinking that interferes with daily life. It is important to be clear that this is not just normal aging. Forgetting where you put your keys is normal. Forgetting what keys are for is not. In Alzheimer's, abnormal proteins build up in and around brain cells, forming what are often described as plaques and tangles. Over time, this damages and kills brain cells, and the brain physically shrinks. It usually starts with short-term memory, recent conversations, and events slipping away, while older memories hang on longer. As it progresses, it affects language, reasoning, mood, recognition, and eventually the ability to manage basic daily tasks. It is a slow progressive condition, and right now there is no cure, which is a hard thing to say plainly. But research increasingly suggests that long-term brain health is connected to long-term body health. The same factors that protect your heart and blood vessels, things like blood pressure control, blood sugar, physical activity, sleep, and staying mentally and socially engaged, appear to play a role in lowering risk. It is not a guarantee, but the brain is not separate from the rest of the body. Obesity. Obesity gets treated as the punchline of this list, the one people roll their eyes at, but medically, it belongs here as a genuine health condition, not a personality flaw. Obesity is when a person carries enough excess body fat that it starts to negatively affect their health. And the reason it matters so much is that it is rarely a standalone problem. Look back over this entire list. Excess body fat, particularly the fat stored around the organs in your abdomen, is a major driver of type 2 diabetes. It raises blood pressure, it worsens heart disease risk, it is linked to several cancers, it adds load and inflammation that worsens arthritis, and it raises stroke risk. It is sort of the central hub that connects to almost everything else. But here is the part worth saying clearly, because the conversation around this gets needlessly cruel. It is not simply a matter of willpower. It is shaped by your food environment, genetics, sleep, stress, hormones, certain medications, and decades of habits, and shame has never once fixed it. What does work is a sustainable change in everyday food and movement, not a punishing crash diet you abandon in 3 weeks. And that is really the thread running through this whole list. Most of these conditions are not random lightning strikes. They are slow stories, and the everyday choices you make, what you eat, how you move, how you sleep, are quietly writing a lot of the plot. You do not control every page. But you're not just a reader either. Heart disease. This is the one that kills more people than anything else on the planet, and most people treat it like it just shows up out of nowhere when you turn 60. It does not. Heart disease is built over decades through the most boring habits imaginable. High blood pressure, quietly damaging the artery walls, LDL cholesterol, slowly building plaque inside those walls, inflammation from a garbage diet, making the whole situation worse. Smoking, stress, carrying too much fat around the midsection. None of these feel dramatic in the moment. That is exactly why they win. By the time someone has their first heart event, the disease has usually been under construction for 20 or 30 years. The prevention is not exciting either, which is probably why people ignore it. Move your body regularly. Walk every single day. Lift weights a few times a week. Keep your weight in a normal range. Eat actual food that came out of the ground, off a tree, or off an animal, not out of a packet with 12 ingredients. Sleep properly. Manage stress. Get your blood pressure and cholesterol checked so you actually know your numbers instead of guessing. Heart disease is one of the most preventable major diseases on earth, and also one of the most ignored, because people would rather hope they get lucky than do small boring things consistently. Type 2 diabetes. This one is essentially a lifestyle disease wearing a medical name tag. Your body uses insulin to move sugar out of your blood and into your cells. When you spend years eating tons of sugar and refined carbs, sitting around and carrying excess body fat, your cells stop responding properly to insulin. The pancreas pumps out more and more, trying to force the message through, until eventually it cannot keep up and your blood sugar starts climbing. That is type 2 diabetes, in plain English. And once it is full-blown, it damages basically every system in your body. Your eyes, your kidneys, your nerves, your blood vessels, your heart, all of it pays the price. The scary part is how quiet it is on the way in. People are pre-diabetic for years and have no idea. Preventing it is actually pretty simple. Stop drinking your calories. Soda, sweet coffee drinks, juice, energy drinks, alcohol, all of it spikes blood sugar without filling you up. Eat protein and fiber at every meal, so your blood sugar does not roller coaster all day. Walk after meals. A 10-minute walk after eating significantly lowers your blood sugar response. Lift weights, because more muscle means more places for sugar to go that are not your blood. Lose body fat if you are carrying too much, especially around the belly. Type 2 diabetes is one of the few major diseases where lifestyle alone can prevent it, reverse it in early stages, and dramatically reduce the damage, even in later stages. Stroke. A stroke is what happens when blood flow to part of your brain gets cut off, either because a blood vessel got blocked or because one burst. Either way, brain tissue starts dying within minutes. Survivors often deal with permanent damage to speech, movement, memory, or personality. It is one of the most life-altering things that can happen to a human being, and most of the risk factors are the same boring ones we just talked about. High blood pressure is the single biggest one. Smoking, diabetes, high cholesterol, atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heart rhythm that lets clots form and then fire up into the brain, heavy drinking, untreated sleep apnea. Almost all of these are either fixable or significantly improvable. Keeping blood pressure in a healthy range is probably the most impactful thing a person can do for their stroke risk, and most people with high blood pressure either do not know they have it or know and ignore it. Buy a blood pressure cuff. They cost about $30. Check yourself every now and then. If it is consistently high, do something about it before something does something to you. Quit smoking if you smoke. Drink less. Move more. Get sleep apnea checked if you snore loudly. Wake up tired, or your partner has ever told you that you stop breathing in your sleep. Cancer. Cancer is not one disease, it is hundreds. And that is why no single prevention rule covers all of it. But there are patterns. A surprising amount of cancer risk is lifestyle-driven, not random bad luck. Smoking causes lung cancer, obviously, but it also raises the risk of about 15 other cancers people never connect to it. Heavy drinking raises the risk of mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, breast, and colon cancer. Being overweight is linked to at least 13 different cancers because excess fat tissue is hormonally and inflammatorily active in ways that promote cancer growth. Processed meat in large amounts is classified as carcinogenic, and red meat in large amounts as probably carcinogenic, which does not mean a steak gives you cancer, but does mean eating bacon every day for 30 years is not nothing. Sun damage causes skin cancer, and skin cancer is one of the more preventable cancers if people would just wear sunscreen and not roast themselves for hours without protection. Then there is the part nobody likes to hear, which is that screening genuinely saves lives. Colonoscopies catch colon cancer before it becomes a problem. Mammograms catch breast cancer early. Skin checks catch melanoma early. Cervical screening catches cervical cancer early. Early-stage cancer is often very treatable. Late-stage cancer often is not. The difference between those two outcomes is sometimes just whether someone bothered to get checked. Speaking of taking care of your body without making it miserable, this is exactly why both Bland is Banned and Summer Shred exist. Bland is Banned is 102 recipes built around high-protein, lower-calorie food that actually tastes like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, the kind of stuff you actually want to eat, just built in a way that helps you stay leaner without hating your life. And Summer Shred is a 6-week personalized program designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it includes a free copy of Bland is Banned with it. Both are half price right now. First link in the description. Alzheimer's and dementia. This is the one people are most afraid of for good reason. Losing your memory, your personality, your ability to recognize the people you love is genuinely one of the worst ways for a life to end. And for years, people assumed it was almost entirely genetic, just a roll of the dice. The research now says something very different. A huge portion of dementia risk is shaped by the same lifestyle factors that drive heart disease and diabetes, because the brain runs on blood vessels too. High blood pressure in your 40s and 50s significantly raises your dementia risk in your 70s. So does diabetes. So does smoking. So does heavy drinking. So does long-term untreated hearing loss, which is something almost nobody talks about, but is actually one of the biggest modifiable risk factors, because hearing loss reduces brain stimulation and increases social isolation. Loneliness itself is a risk factor. Lack of physical activity is a risk factor. Poor sleep across decades is a risk factor. The brain is not separate from the body. It is downstream of everything the body has been doing for 50 years. Prevention looks like exercise, social connection, mentally engaging activity, treating high blood pressure and diabetes properly, protecting your hearing, sleeping well, and not drinking yourself into oblivion every weekend. Chronic respiratory disease. This mostly means COPD and chronic bronchitis, and the vast majority of it is caused by smoking. Years of smoke damage destroys the tiny air sacs in your lungs that exchange oxygen, and once they are gone, they do not come back. People end up tethered to oxygen tanks, unable to walk to the kitchen without sitting down to catch their breath. The prevention here is almost insultingly simple. Do not smoke. If you smoke, quit. It does not matter how long you have smoked, your lungs start improving the moment you stop, and your risk of further damage drops significantly within a few years of quitting. Vaping is not the safe alternative it was marketed as. It still damages the airways, and we are only starting to see the long-term consequences. Air quality matters too. If you live somewhere with bad air pollution, or you work around dust, fumes, or chemicals, protect your lungs the way you would protect any other organ. You only get one of. Asthma is a different animal, more allergy and immune driven, but managing it properly with the medication you have been prescribed, instead of using your rescue inhaler 10 times a day and hoping for the best, prevents permanent airway changes that make it worse over time. Liver disease. Most people think liver disease only happens to alcoholics. Not anymore. Fatty liver disease is now one of the most common liver conditions in the world, and a huge portion of cases have nothing to do with alcohol. They are driven by excess body fat, high sugar intake, fructose specifically, insulin resistance, and a sedentary lifestyle. Your liver was never designed to process the amount of refined sugar and ultra-processed food the average modern person feeds it. Over years, fat starts accumulating inside the liver itself, which then inflames, then scars, and eventually progresses to cirrhosis if nothing changes. Alcohol on top of that accelerates the whole thing. Prevention is again very unglamorous. Cut back on sugar, especially liquid sugar. Lose body fat if you have too much. Move regularly. Drink less alcohol, or just drink occasionally instead of habitually. If you drink every day, even moderate amounts, your liver does not get a break, and that constant low-grade damage adds up. The liver is one of the few organs that can regenerate if you give it a chance. The window for that closes once scarring sets in. Kidney disease. The kidneys are the silent victims of high blood pressure and diabetes. Most chronic kidney disease in the world is caused by one or both of those, slowly damaging the tiny filtering units in the kidneys over years. By the time symptoms show up, the kidneys are often already significantly damaged because they have a lot of reserve capacity and they keep functioning until they really cannot preventing or controlling the things that damage them in the first place. Keep your blood pressure in a healthy range. Keep your blood sugar in a healthy range if you are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Stay hydrated, but not the obsessive gallon-a-day way. Just normal adequate water intake. Be careful with chronic use of painkillers like ibuprofen because long-term high-dose use damages the kidneys. Do not assume your kidneys are fine because nothing hurts. They will not hurt until it is too late. A simple blood test once a year shows you exactly how they are doing. Osteoporosis. This is the disease where your bones lose density over time until they become fragile enough to break from minor falls or even normal movement. It mostly affects older women, but men get it too. The problem with osteoporosis is that you cannot feel it building. You feel fine right up until your wrist snaps from catching yourself on a counter, or your hip breaks from a fall that should not have broken anything. Prevention starts way earlier than people think. You build most of your peak bone density by your late 20s. After that, the goal is to lose as little as possible, as slowly as possible. Lifting weights is genuinely one of the most powerful tools for this, because bone responds to mechanical stress by getting stronger. Adequate protein intake matters because bone is not just calcium, it is also a protein matrix. Calcium and vitamin D matter, obviously. Not smoking matters. Not being severely underweight matters because chronically low body weight is bad for bones. For women going through menopause, the drop in estrogen accelerates bone loss significantly, which is why postmenopausal women are at much higher risk. Strength training becomes even more important in those years, not less. The idea that older people should only do gentle, low-impact exercise is one of the worst pieces of conventional wisdom out there. Bones need load. Give them load. Depression and anxiety disorders. I am including these here because they are diseases, even though people do not always talk about them that way. They are also massively underprevented because most of the conversation is about treatment after the fact. The risk factors that contribute to depression and anxiety include chronic stress, poor sleep, lack of physical activity, social isolation, poor diet, alcohol overuse, scrolling on a phone for 6 hours a day, and never spending time outside in natural light. Genetics play a role. Life events play a role. But the daily inputs play a much bigger role than people give them credit for. The strongest evidence-based things you can do to lower your risk of depression are not particularly mysterious. Exercise regularly, especially aerobic exercise and weightlifting. Get morning sunlight, sleep on a consistent schedule, maintain real in-person relationships, and not just digital ones. Limit alcohol, eat actual food, get off your phone for chunks of the day. None of this guarantees you will never struggle, because brains are complicated and life is hard. But these inputs stack the deck significantly in your favor. People act surprised that their mood is terrible when they sleep 5 hours, drink 4 nights a week, never see sunlight, never move their body, and spend every spare minute on a screen. Your brain is an organ. It needs the same basic care as everything else does. Infections and immune-related illness. Last one. People underestimate how much of long-term health is just not getting hammered repeatedly by infections. Chronic infections drive inflammation, damage tissue, and contribute to all kinds of downstream disease. Some are obvious, like the link between hepatitis and liver cancer, or HPAE and cervical cancer, or H. pylori and stomach ulcers. Some are subtler. Repeated severe respiratory infections damage the lungs over time. Untreated gum disease drives systemic inflammation that affects the heart. Prevention here is partly the basics. Washing your hands properly, not touching your face constantly, staying home when you are sick instead of being a hero. And partly things people forget about. Stay current on vaccines that are actually recommended for your age and situation. Take dental health seriously because your mouth connects to the rest of you. Treat infections properly instead of half-finishing antibiotics or ignoring symptoms for months. Support your baseline immune function by sleeping enough, eating enough protein, not being chronically stressed, and not being severely vitamin D deficient if you live somewhere with weak sunlight. None of this turns you into someone who never gets sick. It just means when you do get hit, your body has the resources to deal with it properly and move on, instead of staying inflamed and damaged for months afterwards. Bacon. Bacon is the food people defend like it is family. And I get it. Crispy fat, salt, a smell strong enough to wake up an entire house. But you have to be honest about what it actually is. Cured, smoked, salted pork belly that has been preserved with nitrates and nitrites, then concentrated down so a small portion packs a serious sodium and saturated fat hit. The protein per calorie is not great because most of the calories are coming from the fat. The processing puts it in the same broad category as the cured meats that keep showing up in cancer risk studies. Is a few rashers on a Sunday going to destroy you? Of course not. But the people eating it daily in massive amounts, treating it like a health food because some low-carb influencer told them to, are kidding themselves. C-tier feels fair, enjoyable, occasional, just not something you build your week around. Wild salmon. If meat had a poster child, this would be it. Wild salmon is basically the protein people who actually care about their health reach for first. And for good reason. You are looking at a serious dose of omega-3s, vitamin D, B12, selenium, and a complete protein profile your body can use without breaking a sweat. The fat in it is the kind of fat that helps your brain, your heart, your hormones, and your joints all at the same time. And because it is wild, it has been eating things it is meant to eat in water it is meant to live in, which is exactly why the nutrient density is so much higher than the farmed version sitting 2 shelves over at the supermarket. A few servings a week genuinely shifts how your body feels. People notice better mood, better skin, better recovery, all from just adding this back into their normal eating week. Easy S tier, no real debate. Hot dogs. I know. Stadiums, barbecues, childhood. I am not here to ruin your summer, but pretending a hot dog is real meat is doing your body a quiet disservice. Most commercial hot dogs are made from mechanically separated meat, which is basically the leftover paste scraped off carcasses, mixed with fillers, binders, sodium, preservatives, and a smoke flavor that came straight out of a bottle. The nitrates and nitrites in there have been linked linked to colorectal cancer risk in pretty much every long-term study that bothered to look at processed meat properly. Sodium content is brutal. The protein-to-calorie ratio is awful compared to literally any whole cut of meat you could grab for the same money. Eating one at a baseball game is not going to kill you. Eating them weekly because they are quick is the part that adds up. F tier, without thinking twice. Pork loin. Pork loin is one of the most underrated lean meats people keep ignoring. The assumption is that pork is automatically fatty because everyone is picturing bacon and pork belly when they hear the word. But the loin is a properly lean cut, comparable to chicken breast in protein to fat ratio, and it brings more flavor and a better mineral profile to the plate. Decent thiamine, B6, selenium, and zinc, all of which most people are not getting nearly enough of from chicken alone. The only real trick is not overcooking it, because lean cuts dry out fast when you panic and leave them in the pan too long. Done right, it is a solid, affordable, high-protein swap for when you're sick of staring at chicken every single night. B tier, because it quietly does its job, without ever needing to be the star. Beef liver. I know what your face is doing right now. Liver has a reputation problem, because most people had it overcooked once, as a kid, mentally filed it under bad, and never gave it another shot. But pound for pound, liver is one of the most nutrient-dense foods on earth. You get more vitamin A in a single serving than most people manage in a month. Massive doses of B12, folate, iron in its most absorbable form, copper, choline, and a protein profile that is as complete as it gets. People take a fistful of supplements trying to chase what one serving of liver gives you naturally. Cook it properly, slice it thin, soak it in milk for a bit if the taste throws you, and you have one of the cheapest superfoods at the entire butcher counter. The rest of the world has been eating this for centuries. We just decided at some point that it was weird. S tier all day. Deli ham. Deli ham is the meat people slap into a sandwich every morning, thinking they are making a smart lean protein choice. The protein number on the package supports the illusion, but you actually have to look at everything else going on. Cured with nitrates and nitrites, brined in sodium solutions to hold weight and moisture, often pumped with sugar, dextrose, and various flavor additives. Some brands inject so much saline that up to 20% of the final weight is just liquid. The color is artificial, the smoke flavor is often artificial, the shelf life is suspiciously long. None of that means a slice will hurt you. But 5 slices a day for 10 years quietly racks up sodium load, processed meat exposure, and the list of additives your body would rather not be dealing with. There are much better protein options for sandwiches. D tier, easily. Lamb. Lamb is one of those meats people in the West keep forgetting exists, but the rest of the world has been treating it like a normal protein for thousands of years. Most lamb is still pasture-raised by default, because the economics of feedlot lamb just do not really work the way they do with cattle. So you get a meat with a strong fatty acid profile, plenty of iron, zinc, B12, selenium, and a flavor density that actually helps you eat less of it and stay full for longer. The fat carries that grassy, earthy quality you only get from animals that actually graze properly. Slightly higher in calories than the leanest cuts of other meats, but the trade is real nutrient density and genuine satiety. Lamb chops, lamb mince, lamb shoulder. All of it earns its place. Solid A tier. And look, the pattern here is already pretty obvious. The closer a meat sits to its original form, the better it does. The more it has been mashed, pressed, dyed, and reshaped into a fun new shape, the worse it gets. That is exactly what my cookbook Bland is Banned is built around. It is 102 high-protein, lower-calorie recipes that lean on real meat, cooked in a way that actually tastes good, instead of feeling like a punishment. Burgers, wraps, fries, pizzas, all the things you would actually want to eat. Just built a bit smarter, so you can stay leaner without hating your life. It is half off right now, first link in the description. And if you want the full transformation route, Summer Shred is my 6-week personalized program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included with it. There is also a free meal plan in the description if you just want to get started today. Take whichever one actually fits you and run with it. Chicken nuggets. This is the part where you act surprised. The frozen and fast food nugget is not chicken in the way you would picture it. The meat used is usually mechanically separated, then bound together with starches, emulsifiers, and flavor enhancers, breaded with refined flour, and fried in seed oils that have been recycled enough times to qualify for hazard pay. Even the ones labeled all white meat are usually pumped with sodium solutions to hold moisture and weight. The actual chicken content by weight is shockingly low in some products. Once you account for the breading and binder, they taste good because they were engineered in a lab to taste good, not because they are actually nutritious. If you want chicken, eat chicken. The shape it comes in matters way more than people think. F tier, no defending it. Bison. Bison is basically what beef would be if it stopped going to fast food restaurants. Naturally lean, almost always grass-fed. Because farming bison the same way you farm cattle just does not really work. And packed with iron, B12, zinc, and complete protein. The fat content is noticeably lower than conventional beef, which makes it easier to fit into most calorie targets without losing flavor. Cooks fast because there is less fat to render, so you do have to pay attention or you will overshoot it and end up with shoe leather. But for protein per calorie nutrient density and food the body actually recognizes straight away, bison is hard to beat. The catch is the price. It is rarely cheap, and you have to know where to look. If your budget can take it occasionally, it is one of the cleanest red meats you can put on a plate. Strong A tier. Sardines. The sardine is the meat nobody talks about and probably the best value at the entire supermarket. A small tin gives you a massive dose of omega-3s, a respectable amount of protein, calcium from the soft edible bones, vitamin D, B12, and selenium. Because they are small fish, low on the food chain, they have basically none of the mercury issues that bigger fish like tuna run into. They cost a few quid, last forever in the cupboard, and require zero cooking. If you actually want to put one foot into the omega-3 lane without taking a single supplement, this is the cheapest way to do it. The smell freaks people out the first time, but you genuinely get used to it within about a week, and your blood work notices the difference well before your nose does. A tier and very underrated. Spam. Spam is what happens when somebody looked at a pig and asked, how do we make this last for 30 years on a shelf? The answer turned out to be a brick of pork shoulder mixed with potato starch, sugar sodium, and sodium nitrite, pressed into a tin and cooked into a shape it was never supposed to be in. The sodium content per serving is absurd, the fat to protein ratio is bad, and the processing puts it firmly into the category of meat your body is going to struggle with if it shows up too often. It exists because it was useful in places where refrigeration was not, and that is a legitimate piece of history. But in a world where you can walk into any shop and buy actual pork, eating spam regularly is a choice. The body is going to clock that choice eventually. F tier. Grass-fed beef. Now we are actually talking. Grass-fed beef has been doing what nature designed it to do, which is eat grass and move around, and the meat reflects that. The omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is significantly better than conventional grain-finished beef. Higher levels of CLA, the fatty acid linked to better body composition, higher levels of vitamins A, E, and the antioxidants the cow picked up from actually eating plants instead of a soy and corn pellet diet in a feedlot. The iron in red meat is the most absorbable form your body can get, which matters more than people realize, especially for women and anyone whose iron tends to run low. The protein is dense, the satiety is real, and the nutrient profile holds up to actual scrutiny. Grass-fed gets shoved into the trendy bucket, but it has been the default for most of human history. It is just beef behaving normally. Comfortable A tier. Tilapia. Tilapia gets sold as a healthy white fish because it is lean and bland and shows up in every gym meal prep tutorial on the internet. But the reality is most tilapia on the market is farmed, and farmed tilapia is fed a diet that bumps up the omega-6 content while keeping the omega-3 content embarrassingly low. So you are getting a fish that in terms of fat profile is closer to a piece of chicken breast than to actual oily fish. The protein is fine, the nutrient density is meh. The conditions some of it is raised in, particularly imports from certain regions, range from acceptable to genuinely grim. It is not the worst thing on this list, but the health halo it carries is not earned. It is just lean, cheap, and very forgettable. C tier. Venison. Venison is the meat your body recognizes faster than almost anything else on this list, because deer are doing exactly what deer have always done. Eating wild plants, running around, getting hunted instead of farmed. The meat that comes off them is naturally lean, packed with iron, B vitamins, and protein, with a fatty acid profile that actually leans towards favorable omega-3 levels. Because of the wild diet, no antibiotics, no hormones, no feedlot. It is dense, it has a distinct flavor that takes a couple of meals to fully appreciate, and it is one of the cleanest sources of red meat available anywhere on the planet. The only real catch is access. Most people are not buying venison weekly because it is not always cheap or easy to find. But when it shows up, you take it. S tier without question. Turkey breast. Turkey breast is basically chicken breast in a slightly different outfit. Lean, high protein, low fat, easy to fit into a calorie target, and gentle on the digestive system. Slightly more iron and zinc than chicken on average, which gives it a small edge. Nutritionally, the downside is the same. Too lean, easy to dry out, not the most nutrient-dense cut you could pick if you were really optimizing. Where it actually gets into trouble is when it gets turned into deli turkey, because at that point, you are basically eating a chicken nugget that has been ironed flat and dressed up in a healthier-looking package. Cooked fresh and kept simple, it is a reliable B-tier protein. Chicken breast, the default fitness food for a reason. High protein, low fat, low calorie, easy to cook in volume, takes whatever seasoning you want to throw at it. The downside is that on its own, it is not especially nutrient-dense compared to other cuts. The breast is the lean white muscle, which means you miss out on a lot of the fat-soluble vitamins and minerals concentrated in the thigh meat and the skin. It is also painfully easy to overcook into something that tastes like a kitchen sponge. But as a protein source for people trying to hit a daily target without going calorie heavy, it absolutely does its job. B tier because it is good, but never the best version of chicken you could be eating. The detox industry. There is no cleanse, no juice, no powder, no 3-day protocol, and no detox on earth that detoxes your body. Your liver and kidneys do that continuously, every second of every day, and they do it better than anything you can buy. The entire detox supplement and cleanse industry is built on the idea that your organs are failing at their primary job and need outside help from a product that costs $45. They are not failing, they are fine. What detox products actually do is create a calorie deficit for a few days by replacing meals with liquids, which causes temporary water weight loss that reverses the moment you eat normally again. Some also act as laxatives, which produces a sense of being emptied out that people interpret as toxins leaving. That is not toxins leaving, that is your bowel being irritated into moving faster. The word toxin itself is used deliberately, vaguely in this space, because naming an actual toxin would require the product to demonstrate it removes that specific thing, which none of them can. If you asked a cleanse company which specific toxins their product removes, and by what measurable amount, you would get a marketing answer, not a scientific one. The industry is worth billions precisely because the claim can never be disproved by the person buying it. Your body does not need a cleanse. It needs water, sleep, and food with enough fiber to keep things moving. The supplement industry at large. The supplement industry operates in a regulatory environment that allows products to be sold with health claims that do not require clinical proof before hitting shelves, only after there is enough evidence of harm to trigger a ban. This means a company can sell you a capsule that does nothing, call it a metabolism booster or an immune support formula, and face essentially no consequences unless people start getting seriously hurt. The vast majority of supplements sold in pharmacies and health food stores have no meaningful clinical evidence behind them at their sold dose and in the population buying them. Fat burners, most proprietary blends, collagen powders for skin health, biotin for hair growth at doses above what diet already provides, most adaptogen supplements, herbal energy products. The evidence is weak, absent, or only exists in studies that bear little resemblance to how the product is actually being used. The marketing is good. The science is not. The supplements with genuinely solid evidence are a short list. Creatine for muscle performance, vitamin D if you are actually deficient, or magnesium for people whose intake is low, protein powder if you cannot hit your target through food. Most of the rest is expensive optimism sold to people who are already doing most things right and looking for an edge that does not exist in a capsule. The alkaline water and alkaline diet. Your blood pH is maintained within an extremely tight range by your lungs and kidneys, regardless of what you eat or drink. It has to be. A shift of even 0.05 pH units outside normal range is a medical emergency. The idea that drinking alkaline water or eating alkaline foods changes your body's pH is physiologically false. The moment alkaline water hits your stomach acid neutralizes it immediately. There is no mechanism by which it reaches your cells at an elevated pH. Your body simply does not allow it. Companies selling alkaline water at $6 to $8 a bottle are selling you a chemistry experiment that resolves itself before any claimed benefit can occur. The alkaline diet does have some genuine benefits, but those benefits come entirely from the fact that it emphasizes vegetables, fruit, and whole foods while limiting processed food, not from any pH effect. You could achieve the same outcome eating a well-structured non-alkaline diet. The pH framing is marketing invented to give a biological sounding explanation for why eating more vegetables is good, because eating more vegetables does not sell premium water. The low-fat food movement. This one has already been partially corrected in public discourse, but it deserves the full version. In the 1970s and 80s, dietary guidelines and food industry marketing converged on the message that fat was the cause of heart disease and obesity, and that reducing fat intake was the key to health. The science behind this was weaker than it appeared. Ancel Keys, the researcher most associated with the fat heart disease link, famously selected data from countries that supported his hypothesis and excluded countries that did not. The food industry, sensing a marketing opportunity, responded by producing low-fat versions of everything, which required replacing the fat with sugar and refined starch to maintain palatability and texture. The result was a generation of people eating fat-free cookies, reduced-fat yogurts, and low-fat salad dressings, thinking they were making healthy choices, while consuming more added sugar than any previous generation. Obesity rates climbed anyway. Type 2 diabetes rates climbed. The original hypothesis has since been significantly revised and qualified. but the infrastructure of low-fat marketing had enough momentum and institutional backing to run for 30 years before the science caught up publicly. Some of it is still running today, in the form of products that still display low fat or reduced fat as a positive attribute. The anti-aging skincare industry. The anti-aging skincare market generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually, and a very large portion of it is selling products that cannot do what they claim to do, not because the ingredients are fake, but because the delivery mechanism does not work. Collagen is one of the most common examples. Collagen molecules are too large to penetrate the skin barrier. Applying collagen topically does not increase collagen in the dermis. The collagen sits on the surface and washes off. It might provide very short-term surface hydration, which is something, but it is not the structural collagen replenishment being implied. Retinol actually does penetrate and has decades of evidence behind it. Vitamin C serum has evidence at the right concentration and formulation. Hyaluronic acid works at the surface to temporarily plump skin. But the majority of products sold with anti-aging claims, particularly luxury ones, at triple-digit price points, contain ingredients that either cannot reach the cells they are supposed to affect or are present in concentrations too low to do anything meaningful. The luxury packaging and price point signal efficacy that the formula does not always justify. Consistent broad-spectrum sunscreen use does more for the visible aging of skin than almost everything else combined. It is not exciting enough to sell at a premium, which is why it does not get the marketing budget. And if you want to spend your money on something that actually makes a difference day to day, my cookbook is 102 recipes built around high-protein, lower-calorie food that tastes like real food. Half off right now for just $14.99. First link in the description. The weight loss supplement market. Fat burners are legal because the FDA only removes them after significant documented harm, and most fat burner ingredients produce effects too mild to trigger that threshold. What fat burners typically contain is some combination of caffeine, green tea extract, cayenne, and various other ingredients claimed to raise metabolic rate. Caffeine does have a small thermogenic effect, so does green tea extract. The actual caloric expenditure added by these products is small enough that most studies put it at somewhere between 50 and 100 extra calories per day, at most, which is less than a banana. The marketing presents them as significant contributors to fat loss. At the dose they are sold, the contribution is minimal and the effect diminishes further as the body adapts to the stimulant load. The products that have historically produced more dramatic results have repeatedly turned out to contain undisclosed pharmaceutical compounds or banned stimulants. DMAA, ephedrine analogs, various designer compounds that slip through regulatory gaps. The ones that are actually safe are not doing very much. The ones that were doing a lot were not safe. This is not a coincidence. It is the pattern. The functional food health halo. Acai bowls, kombucha, oat milk lattes with adaptogens, activated charcoal lemonade, collagen coffee. A significant portion of the health food industry runs on what is called the health halo effect, where a product is associated strongly enough with health and wellness that consumers assume it is nutritionally beneficial, without examining what it actually contains. An acai bowl from a restaurant typically contains around 500 to 700 calories, and significant amounts of added sugar from the sweetened acai base, granola, honey drizzle, and fruit toppings. It is not a bad food, but it is not the light, virtuous choice the branding suggests. Kombucha contains trace amounts of probiotics that may or may not survive to the gut in meaningful numbers, and often more sugar than the health framing implies. Oat milk is nutritionally a lightly sweetened starch water with some added vitamins, and a very small amount of protein, not the substantive upgrade from dairy that the marketing implies. None of these foods are inherently bad, but the prices they command and the health claims attached to them are built on branding and aesthetics rather than a proportional nutritional benefit. You are often paying a significant premium for the feeling of making a healthy choice rather than for a food that is meaningfully superior to cheaper alternatives. The people selling these products understand that health-adjacent imagery and a few compelling buzzwords on the label are more powerful than any ingredient. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You have almost certainly heard this phrase your entire life, and you have probably never questioned where it came from. It came from cereal companies. Specifically, it was popularized as a marketing claim in the early 1900s by companies like Kellogg's and Post, who needed a reason for people to eat their products every morning. The idea was embedded so thoroughly into culture, through advertising, and eventually into school nutrition messaging, that it became accepted as established health fact. It is not. The actual research on breakfast does not support the idea that it is inherently necessary or that skipping it damages metabolism. Studies that appear to show breakfast eaters are healthier are almost entirely confounded by lifestyle. People who eat breakfast also tend to be more structured in other health behaviors. When you control for that, the meal timing itself is not the active ingredient. Millions of people people eat breakfast they do not want, feel hungry earlier because of it, and consume more total calories across the day than they would have if they had simply waited until they were genuinely hungry. Intermittent fasting, which often involves skipping breakfast entirely, produces the same or better results as 3-meal-a-day eating. For many people, eat breakfast if you are hungry, and it works for your life. Do not eat it out of obligation to a cereal company's marketing campaign. From 1910. Health cereals. While we are on the subject, most cereals marketed as healthy are not particularly healthy. Raisin Bran, Honey Nut Cheerios, Special K, many of the granola varieties, most of the ones with words like wholesome, natural, high fiber, or heart healthy on the box, are heavily processed grain products with significant amounts of added sugar. Honey Nut Cheerios contains more sugar per serving than a chocolate biscuit. Most granolas are closer to a dessert than a nutritious morning meal. The health halo on these products comes from the inclusion of one genuinely positive attribute: whole grain oats, fiber-fortified vitamins, and the packaging language around it, while the added sugar, refined ingredients, and caloric density take a back seat. The front of the box says one thing. The nutrition panel on the back says another. The people who make these products know that most people read the front and move on. The cereals that are actually decent tend to be the boring-looking ones with short ingredient lists, minimal added sugar, and no cartoon mascot or athlete endorsing them. The more aggressively a cereal is marketed as healthy, the more carefully you should read what is actually in it. The 10,000 steps myth, the specific number of 10,000 steps per day that has become embedded in fitness culture and wearable device defaults, did not originate from a scientific study. It originated from a Japanese marketing campaign in the 1960s for a pedometer called a Manpo-kei, which translates to 10,000 step meter. The number was chosen because it was round and memorable, not because research determined it was the optimal daily step count for human health. More recent research has actually found that meaningful health benefits began accumulating at much lower step counts, around 6,000 to 7,000 steps per day, and that the benefit curve flattens significantly above roughly 8,000 steps for most health outcomes in most populations. The 10,000 number is not harmful, and moving more is genuinely good, but millions of people feel like failures every day because they hit 7,500 steps instead of an arbitrary marketing number from a Japanese pedometer campaign 60 years ago. The goal of moving consistently and avoiding prolonged sitting is real. The specific number attached to it was invented to sell a product. Tension headache. This is the one almost everyone gets, and it is so common that people barely consider it a real headache anymore. It is the one that feels like a band tightening around your head, both sides, dull and steady, sometimes with the back of your neck and shoulders feeling like cement. Tension headaches are not coming from inside your brain. They are coming from the muscles in your scalp, jaw, neck, and upper shoulders staying contracted for too long. That contraction usually traces back to stress, bad posture, hours of looking down at a screen, jaw clenching, or just generally holding your body like you are bracing for a punch at all times. The annoying part is most people treat it as a pain to silence rather than a signal to fix. They reach for painkillers, get on with the day, and recreate the exact same situation tomorrow. The headache keeps coming back because the muscles never actually got to switch off. Real fixes are unglamorous. Hydrate properly. Stop hunching over your phone for hours. Stretch your traps and neck. Unclench your jaw, which you are probably doing right now. Get more sleep. Manage stress. It is not a clever solution. It is just the boring one that actually works. Cluster headache. This one earns its nickname, which is suicide headache, because the pain is genuinely on another planet. Cluster headaches almost always hit one side of the head, usually behind or around one eye, and they come on fast, peaking in around 10 minutes. The eye on that side goes red and watery, the nostril runs or blocks, the eyelid might droop, and the person cannot sit still through it. People with cluster headaches do not lie in a dark room like migraine sufferers. They pace, rock, and sometimes bang things because the agitation is its own symptom. The brutal part is in the name. They come in clusters. You might get 1 to several attacks per day, for weeks or months, then nothing for a long stretch. Then it comes back. The exact cause is not fully nailed down, but research keeps pointing to the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that runs your body clock, which explains why these headaches often hit at the same time every day and frequently wake people up at night. Triggers include alcohol during a cluster period, big changes in sleep, and certain altitude or barometric shifts. This, one, is not a tough it out situation. If you are getting headaches that are genuinely incapacitating and one-sided, this is the category doctors are checking for. And there are real treatments for it now, including high-flow oxygen, which can stop an attack in minutes. Dehydration headache. This one is sneaky because most people are slightly dehydrated most of the time, and they have no idea. When your fluid volume drops, your brain tissue temporarily contracts slightly inside the skull and pulls on the membranes lining the inside, which is what gets perceived as pain. Your blood becomes more concentrated, your cerebral blood vessels react, and you get this dull, all over, worse when you move headache that feels like your skull is too tight for what is inside it. The catch is, it is often not just water. Your body needs sodium and other electrolytes for fluid balance to actually work. Chugging plain water after sweating heavily or after a long night drinking can sometimes make the headache stick around, because you are diluting your electrolytes instead of replacing them. Most dehydration headaches resolve within 30 to 60 minutes of getting actual hydration on board. Water plus a pinch of salt or some electrolytes, with a small amount of food. If your headache lifts that quickly, once you drink properly, you basically just diagnosed yourself. Migraine. People throw the word migraine around like it just means a bad headache. It does not. A real migraine is a neurological event, not just intense pain. It usually hits one side of the head, throbs with your heartbeat, and comes with this whole package of effects: light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, nausea, sometimes vomiting, and a need to lie still in a dark, quiet room because every sensory input feels turned up to maximum. Some people get aura before the pain, which is a sort of warning event in the brain that shows up as visual zigzags, blind spots, tingling in the face or hand, or strange speech difficulty for a short period before the headache itself kicks in. The mechanism involves a wave of altered electrical activity moving across the surface of the brain, changes in blood vessel behavior, and the activation of the trigeminal nerve, which is the big sensory nerve of the face. Triggers vary so much from person to person that it is basically a fingerprint. For some people, it is red wine. For others, aged cheese, hormonal swings, missed meals, poor sleep, weather changes, bright lights, or stress let down after a busy week. Some people only get a few migraines a year. Others get them every week. The newer migraine-specific medications are genuinely changing things, but the foundation is still tracking your own triggers honestly and protecting your sleep, your meals, and your stress load before the next attack lines up. Caffeine withdrawal headache. This is the headache of people who drink coffee every single morning and then accidentally sleep in, skip their cup, or try to quit cold turkey. Caffeine works partly by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain, which is why it makes you feel more alert. When you take it regularly, your brain compensates by making more adenosine receptors. The moment caffeine is missing, all those extra receptors suddenly have nothing blocking them. Adenosine floods in, blood vessels dilate, and you get this thick, heavy, often pulsing headache, usually paired with fatigue and a mood that ranges from grumpy to outright furious. The fix in the short term is obvious. Drink caffeine, the headache will lift within 30 to 60 minutes. The longer game, if you actually want to reduce your caffeine intake, is to step it down gradually instead of cutting overnight. Half a cup less every few days, or swapping some of your cups for decaf or weaker tea, lets your brain quietly remove the extra receptors without throwing a tantrum. If you keep cycling between heavy caffeine all week and zero caffeine on weekends, you're basically scheduling a headache every Saturday, which a lot of people do without ever realizing that is what is happening. And honestly, a lot of these headache patterns trace right back to the same boring stuff people refuse to fix. Sleep is rubbish, food is rubbish, hydration is rubbish, body composition is drifting the wrong way, and then everyone is shocked their head hurts 5 days a week. That is exactly why I built both the Bland is Banned cookbook and the Summer Shred program. The cookbook is 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and they actually taste like real food you would want to eat. Stuff like burgers, wraps, loaded fries, pizzas, desserts, all of it. None of the sad diet food people try once and quit. And the Summer Shred program is a 6-week personalized program made exactly for you and designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. So you're not just following some generic PDF and pretending it is built for your life. It also comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. The cookbook on its own is now half price, and Summer Shred is also half off for launch right now. So if you want them, be quick and grab them while the sale is still on. First link in the description. Sinus headache. This is the most overdiagnosed headache on earth, mostly because the symptoms overlap with migraine, and people self-diagnose based on the fact that their face hurts. A real sinus headache is caused by an actual sinus infection or significant sinus blockage, with mucus or pressure building up in the air-filled cavities in your skull. The pain sits across the cheeks, forehead, and around the bridge of the nose, and it usually worsens when you bend forward. It tends to come with thick colored mucus, a blocked nose, sometimes fever, and the feeling that your face is full of cement. The misleading part is that migraines very often cause facial pressure, watery eyes, and a stuffy nose too, which is why people who have been calling their headaches sinus headaches for years sometimes turn out to have been having migraines the whole time. The treatment for actual sinus issues is what you would expect: decongestants, steam saline rinses, and if it is a proper bacterial infection that is not resolving, sometimes antibiotics. If you regularly get sinus headaches without ever actually having a snotty cold to go with them, there is a decent chance you do not have a sinus problem at all. You probably have migraines that are dressing up convincingly. Hangover headache. This one combines several different attacks on your head at once, which is why it feels so disproportionately awful for what was meant to be a fun night. Alcohol dehydrates you because it suppresses the hormone that tells your kidneys to hold on to water, so you spend half the night urinating out more fluid than you took in. It also expands blood vessels, including the ones around the brain, which is part of why a hangover headache often throbs. On top of that, when your liver breaks down alcohol, it produces acetaldehyde, a compound far more toxic than alcohol itself, and your body has to work through that before things calm down. Then there is the sleep angle. Alcohol seems like it knocks you out, but it actually wrecks the structure of your sleep, suppressing REM and giving you fragmented, low-quality rest. You wake up tired, dehydrated, mildly inflamed, with low blood sugar and a head that feels like someone is squeezing it. The only real treatment is time, food, hydration with electrolytes, and not stacking it with painkillers that hammer your liver while it is already busy. The prevention is also not a mystery. Drink less, or drink with proper food and water alongside it, or accept the headache as the receipt. Cervicogenic headache. This is the headache that is actually coming from your neck, not your head. The nerves at the top of your spine share pathways with the nerves that supply pain to your face and skull. So problems in your upper cervical region get felt as pain in your head. Cervicogenic headaches are usually one-sided, start at the base of the skull, and travel forward toward the temple or behind the eye. The giveaway is that certain neck positions make it worse, and pressing into specific spots on the neck reproduces the pain almost on demand. The cause is usually some combination of forward head posture, from phone and computer use, sleeping in a way that wrecks your neck, an old whiplash injury, or arthritic changes in the upper cervical joints. Painkillers help a little, but do not really fix it, because the source of the pain is mechanical. What actually moves the needle is sorting out posture, strengthening the deep neck flexors, stretching the muscles that have shortened from being held forward all day, and in stubborn cases physio or manual therapy on the upper neck joints. If your headaches consistently start at the back of your head and crawl forward, this category is worth investigating before you assume it is something else. Medication overuse. Headache. This one is properly cruel. It is the headache caused by treating headaches. If you take painkillers more than about 2 or 3 days a week for an extended period, especially the over-the-counter combination ones with caffeine in them, your brain starts to adapt to them. When the medication wears off, you get a rebound headache, so you take more, which gives short relief, which leads to another rebound. After a while, you are in a loop where you are taking painkillers most days of the week and getting daily low-grade headaches that never fully resolve. The diagnosis itself is depressing, because the only real fix is to stop the painkillers, which means going through a withdrawal period where the headache often gets worse before it gets better. Most people who break out of this report that within 2 to 6 weeks of stopping their daily medication, their headaches become both less frequent and less severe than they were even before they started self-medicating. It is one of the clearest examples of how a treatment can quietly become the disease. And it tends to happen to the kind of person who is just trying to function and never thought twice about how often they were reaching for the pill bottle. Exertion headache. This is the headache that shows up during or right after heavy effort, lifting something heavy, sprinting, intense sex, even straining on the toilet for too long. The trigger is a sudden spike in pressure inside the skull, combined with changes in blood flow during exertion. It hits both sides, throbs, and can last anywhere from a few minutes to a day. Most exertion headaches are benign and tend to happen in people who are already prone to migraines, especially in hot weather, at altitude, or when they are dehydrated. The catch is that a first-time severe headache during exertion is one of the situations doctors take seriously, because rare but dangerous things like a brain aneurysm, bleeding can present that way. If you regularly get a mild ache after heavy lifting or hard cardio that fades on its own with rest and fluid, it is most likely benign and not something to spiral about. If you ever get a sudden blinding worst headache of your life during exertion, that is not the moment to wait and see. Hypnic headache. This is one a lot of people have never heard of. It is sometimes called alarm clock headache because it wakes the person up from sleep at almost exactly the same time every night, usually between 1 and 3 in the morning. It tends to show up in people over 50, sits as a dull or moderate pain on both sides, and lasts somewhere between 15 minutes and a few hours before fading. Then it happens again the next night, often the same time, like clockwork. It is not yet fully understood, but it seems tied to the same brain region that regulates the sleep-wake cycle, which is why the timing is so consistent. The usual headache medications do not always help, but interestingly, a small cup of caffeine before bed, actually helps a lot of people with this one, which is the exact opposite of what you would expect. If you are over 40 getting reliably woken up by a headache at the same time most nights, and sleep apnea has already been ruled out, this is the category worth bringing up with your doctor rather than just buying a stronger painkiller and hoping it goes away. Thunderclap headache. This is the one that does not belong in this video the way the others do. Every other headache on this list, you can think about, manage at home, and learn to handle. A thunderclap headache is a medical emergency. It is defined as a headache that reaches maximum severity within 60 seconds, often described by survivors as being hit on the back of the head with a baseball bat. There is no slow build, no warning, no time to think. It is just suddenly the worst headache of your life. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. Cutting caffeine off earlier than you think. The idea that you can drink coffee at 4 p.m. and still sleep fine is a lie a lot of people tell themselves, because the alternative is admitting their morning brain runs on multiple cups. Caffeine has a half-life of around 5 to 6 hours, which means if you have a coffee at 4 p.m., half of that caffeine is still actively bouncing around your nervous system at 10 p.m. The other quarter is still there at around 4 a.m. And the way caffeine works in the brain is it blocks adenosine, which is the chemical that builds up during the day and tells your brain it is tired. Adenosine is basically the system that lets you slip into deep sleep properly. So even if you fall asleep after a late coffee, the depth and quality of that sleep is quietly being undercut by caffeine still occupying the adenosine receptors. People then wake up tired, blame their pillow, and reach for another coffee. The actual fix is boring. Have your last caffeine no later than early afternoon. Most sleep researchers will say 8 to 10 hours before bedtime as the cutoff. If you sleep at 11, that means your last coffee is around 1 to 2 p.m. And before you start telling yourself you are different, because coffee does not affect you. The studies on this are wild. People who insist caffeine does not affect their sleep, when actually measured in a lab, almost always show fragmented sleep architecture. They cannot feel subjectively. They just got used to sleeping badly. Keeping the bedroom cold. Your body has to drop its core temperature by about 1 degree Celsius to fall asleep properly and stay in deeper sleep stages. That is not optional. It is part of how the sleep cycle is initiated. If your bedroom is too warm, your body cannot offload heat efficiently through the skin, which means lighter sleep and more wake-ups in the night. The ideal sleep temperature for most people sits somewhere between 16 and 19 degrees Celsius, roughly 60 to 67 Fahrenheit. That feels colder than most people set their bedrooms. It is supposed to. Cool room, warm blankets, that is the formula. The blankets create a controllable microclimate around your body, while the room itself is letting your skin radiate heat away. Sleeping with the heating cranked up and 3 duvets piled on top is doing the opposite. It traps you in a warm bubble, your body cannot vent heat, and you end up tossing and sweating without quite knowing why. You slept like rubbish. People also underestimate how much summer heat destroys sleep quality. If you live somewhere hot and you do not have a way to cool the room, a fan pointed at the bed plus a cold shower an hour or so before bed is the closest free version of the same effect. Morning sunlight on your face. Your sleep at night is decided in the morning. That is not a quote from a wellness Instagram. That is just how circadian biology works. Your brain has a master clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it sets your sleep timing based on light hitting your eyes. Bright outdoor light early in the day tells your brain that the day has started, anchors your cortisol peak to that point, and starts a roughly 14 to 16 hour countdown to when melatonin should be released for sleep. Without that morning light signal, the whole rhythm drifts. People who stay indoors all morning with curtains drawn and ceiling lights on are not giving the brain enough light intensity to register. Indoor light is hundreds of times weaker than outdoor light, even on a cloudy day. The hack is simple. Within the first hour of waking up, get outside for 5 to 15 minutes. No sunglasses, no looking through a window, just outside. Coffee on a porch counts. Standing in the garden counts. People who do this for a few weeks straight tend to notice they fall asleep earlier without trying, and wake up before their alarm. That is not magic. That is just the circadian system finally getting a clear signal. The hot shower trick. This one sounds backwards, but it is one of the most reliable sleep hacks there is. A hot shower or bath about 60 to 90 minutes before bed makes you fall asleep faster and sleep more deeply. The trick is that the hot water raises blood flow to your skin and extremities, and once you step out, that warm blood radiates heat away from your body very efficiently. The end result is your core body temperature drops faster than it would otherwise, which is exactly the signal sleep onset requires. So a hot shower does not warm you up for bed, it cools you down for bed. The timing matters though. If you shower hot 10 minutes before lying down, you are still in the warming up phase, and you will lie there feeling overheated, wondering why this whole thing did not work. Give it the 60 to 90 minute window so the cool down lines up with bedtime. Studies on this have been consistent enough that it has its own name in the sleep research world, where it is sometimes called passive body heating. Boring name. Excellent result. And while we are on the subject of doing simple things that actually move the needle, that is exactly the same logic behind both the Blandis Band cookbook and the Summer Shred program. The cookbook has 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts. Normal food, just built in a way that helps you stay leaner without hating every meal. And the Summer Shred program is a 6-week personalized program built exactly for you, so you are not just downloading some generic PDF and hoping it fits your life. It is designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, and it comes with a free copy of Blandis Band included. Both are half off for launch right now, so be quick if you want them while the sale is still on. First link in the description. Treating the bed as sleep only. This is the rule most people break without realizing, and it quietly trains their brain to associate the bed with the wrong stuff. If you work in bed, eat in bed, scroll in bed, watch shows in bed, take phone calls in bed, then by the time you actually lie down to sleep, your brain is not pattern matching the bed to sleep. It is pattern matching the bed to be alert, to be entertained, to be productive, to be stressed. So you lie there waiting for sleep, and your brain is genuinely confused about what is supposed to happen now. Sleep psychologists call this stimulus control, and it is one of the strongest interventions in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. The rule is simple and uncompromising. Bed is for sleep. That is it. The exception people usually allow is intimacy, which is fine. Everything else moves out. Scrolling moves to the sofa, shows move to the living room. Reading is debated, but if you are going to read, do it sitting up rather than buried under the covers staring at a screen. Within a couple of weeks of doing this properly, lying down in bed becomes its own trigger. Your brain associates the position and the sheets with sleep, and falling asleep gets noticeably faster without you having to white-knuckle it. Skipping the nightcap. Alcohol gets sold as a sleep aid because it makes people drowsy. And there is a tiny technical sense in which that is true. It depresses your central nervous system, which makes you fall asleep faster. The problem is what happens after that. Alcohol absolutely destroys the second half of your sleep. It suppresses REM sleep, fragments sleep cycles, increases nighttime awakenings, and turns your gentle, middle-of-the-night dream phases into something closer to a chemical coma, followed by a rebound surge of alertness around 3 a.m. That is why people who drink before bed often fall asleep fine and then wake up at some ridiculous hour with their heart pounding and their brain doing laps. The next morning, they wake up dehydrated, foggy, and weirdly tired considering they were unconscious all night. The dose matters. A glass of wine with dinner 3 hours before bed is not the issue. The issue is the regular nightcap right before sleep, which is genuinely one of the worst things you can do to your sleep quality on a recurring basis. If you want better sleep, and you drink most nights, even just shifting the last drink to a few hours before bed and dropping the volume slightly will produce a noticeable difference within a week. Same wake time every day. Most people focus on bedtime as the variable they need to control, when actually wake time is the more important one. Your circadian rhythm is anchored more strongly by when you wake up than when you go to sleep. If you wake up at 6:30 on weekdays and 10:30 on weekends, your body is essentially being asked to do a 4-hour time zone change every Friday and Sunday. That is, jet lag without the holiday. The Monday morning slump that people blame on the weekend is often called social jet lag in sleep research, and it is a real measurable effect. The fix is to keep your wake time within about an hour of your weekday wake time, even on weekends. So if you usually wake at 6:30, sleeping until 7:30 on a Saturday is fine. Sleeping until 10:30 is breaking the system. The bedtime can flex a little. That is less of a problem. What you cannot do without consequences is keep moving the wake time around by hours and expect Monday to feel decent. The people who have the most consistent energy across the week are almost always the ones with the most consistent wake times. And that is true even when their total hours of sleep are not particularly impressive. Nasal breathing at night. If you wake up with a dry mouth, a sore throat, or the pillow next to your face is damp with drool, you are mouth breathing while you sleep. And that is doing more damage than people realize. Your nose was specifically designed to handle the air you breathe in. It filters out particles, humidifies the air, warms it, and produces nitric oxide, which helps with oxygen uptake in the lungs. When you breathe through your mouth all night, none of that processing happens. Raw, dry, unfiltered air goes straight into your airways for 8 hours. That dries out the tissues, increases the risk of throat infections, contributes to morning bad breath, and is strongly associated with worse sleep quality, more snoring, and a higher risk of sleep apnea. A lot of people who sleep poorly and assume they just need more hours are actually just spending all night breathing wrong. The fix is mouth taping. Sounds ridiculous. Works extremely well for most people. A small piece of skin-safe tape across the lips at night keeps the mouth closed and forces nasal breathing. Within a few nights, people often report deeper sleep, less snoring, no more dry mouth, and feeling more rested even on the same number of hours. If your nose is genuinely too blocked to breathe through, that is a separate problem to sort out first. But for most people, it is just a habit they fell into and never corrected. Total darkness. Your brain does not need much light to register that it is there. Even small amounts of light through eyelids during sleep can suppress melatonin, fragment sleep cycles, and reduce the quality of deeper sleep stages. Studies have shown that sleeping with even a dim ambient light source raises overnight heart rate and impairs glucose metabolism the next morning, compared to sleeping in proper darkness. That includes the standby light on a TV, the glow from a phone charger, light leaking around curtains from streetlights, the little LED on a smoke detector. None of that is bright enough that you would notice consciously. Your brain notices anyway. The fix is blackout curtains, covering or removing electronic indicator lights. And if you cannot get the room dark enough, a proper sleep mask, the kind that contours around the eyes so there is no pressure on the eyelids. People who switch from a partially lit room to a properly dark one often report sleeping more deeply within a couple of nights. The body was built to sleep in caves and forests, not in a city bedroom with 17 low-grade light sources quietly humming away all night. The 20-minute rule. If you have been lying in bed, unable to sleep for what feels like more than 20 minutes, the worst thing you can do is keep lying there frustrated. The longer you spend in bed awake and anxious, the more your brain associates the bed with being awake and anxious, and the harder future sleep gets. The counterintuitive fix is to get out of bed, go to another room, keep the lights dim, do something quiet and boring, read a real book, not a screen. No work, no scrolling. Nothing stimulating. When you start feeling sleepy, go back to bed. If you are still awake 20 minutes later, get up again. This is a core technique in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and it works because it breaks the association between bed and wakefulness. Most people do the opposite. They lie in bed for 2 hours getting increasingly stressed about not sleeping, which is basically training their brain to fail at sleep on purpose. The willingness to get out of bed feels wrong, but it is the move that separates people who actually sort out their sleep from people who spend years complaining about it. Eating earlier rather than later. Eating a big meal close to bedtime is one of those things almost everyone does occasionally, without realizing it costs them sleep that night. Digestion is metabolically demanding. It raises your core body temperature, increases heart rate slightly, and asks your body to work hard during a window where it is supposed to be winding down. On top of that, lying flat with a stomach full of food increases acid reflux, which fragments sleep without you necessarily waking up enough to remember it. The best window is to stop eating about 2 to 3 hours before bed, not because of some magical fat loss mechanism, just because going to bed with a half-digested meal sitting in your stomach genuinely interferes with sleep quality. Late-night snacking, especially anything high in sugar or refined carbs, can also cause overnight blood sugar swings that trigger microarousals you do not consciously notice, but that show up in measured sleep data the next morning. If you absolutely have to eat close to bed, keep it small, keep it mostly protein with some fat, and skip the sugary stuff. But ideally, you finish dinner earlier than you currently do, and the closer to 3 hours before bed the better. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. Cutting caffeine off earlier than you think. The idea that you can drink coffee at 4 p.m. and still sleep fine is a lie a lot of people tell themselves, because the alternative is admitting their morning brain runs on multiple cups. Caffeine has a half-life of around 5 to 6 hours, which means if you have a coffee at 4 p.m., half of that caffeine is still actively bouncing around your nervous system at 10 p.m. The other quarter is still there at around 4 a.m. And the way caffeine works in the brain is it blocks adenosine, which is the chemical that builds up during the day and tells your brain it is tired. Adenosine is basically the system that lets you slip into deep sleep properly. So even if you fall asleep after a late coffee, the depth and quality of that sleep is quietly being undercut by caffeine still occupying the adenosine receptors. People then wake up tired, blame their pillow, and reach for another coffee. The actual fix is boring. Have your last caffeine no later than early afternoon. Most sleep researchers will say 8 to 10 hours before bedtime as the cutoff. If you sleep at 11, that means your last coffee is around 1 to 2 p.m. And before you start telling yourself you are different, because coffee does not affect you. The studies on this are wild. People who insist caffeine does not affect their sleep, when actually measured in a lab, almost always show fragmented sleep architecture. They cannot feel subjectively. They just got used to sleeping badly. Keeping the bedroom cold. Your body has to drop its core temperature by about 1 degree Celsius to fall asleep properly and stay in deeper sleep stages. That is not optional. It is part of how the sleep cycle is initiated. If your bedroom is too warm, your body cannot offload heat efficiently through the skin, which means lighter sleep and more wake-ups in the night. The ideal sleep temperature for most people sits somewhere between 16 and 19 degrees Celsius. Celsius, roughly 60 to 67 Fahrenheit. That feels colder than most people set their bedrooms. It is supposed to. Cool room, warm blankets, that is the formula. The blankets create a controllable microclimate around your body, while the room itself is letting your skin radiate heat away. Sleeping with the heating cranked up and 3 duvets piled on top is doing the opposite. It traps you in a warm bubble, your body cannot vent heat, and you end up tossing and sweating without quite knowing why. You slept like rubbish. People also underestimate how much summer heat destroys sleep quality. If you live somewhere hot and you do not have a way to cool the room, a fan pointed at the bed, plus a cold shower an hour or so before bed, is the closest free version of the same effect. Morning sunlight on your face. Your sleep at night is decided in the morning. That is not a quote from a wellness Instagram. That is just how circadian biology works. Your brain has a master clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it sets your sleep timing based on light hitting your eyes. Bright outdoor light early in the day tells your brain that the day has started, anchors your cortisol peak to that point, and starts a roughly 14 to 16 hour countdown to when melatonin should be released for sleep. Without that morning light signal, the whole rhythm drifts. People who stay indoors all morning with curtains drawn and ceiling lights on are not giving the brain enough light intensity to register. Indoor light is hundreds of times weaker than outdoor light, even on a cloudy day. The hack is simple. Within the first hour of